This is disgraceful!
I'm terribly sorry and all that.
Well, you were expecting us, surely. And now you add insult to injury by doubting my credentials!
Who the blazes are you?
Pull to open.
Pull to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
We are here to inspect
The war games.
The war games.
The war games recommenced.
I suggest we stop wasting time and get on with it! What is it?
They're coming.
Here come the drums!
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open.
Oh my goodness.
An ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I am Security Chief Pete Paschal.
Yeah, security chief reference in the first minute. And I am Chris Taylor, and we're a couple of guys, and apparently now we're a stand-up act. Maybe we just do impressions. Like, I'll do my war chief later. Could it be? We are a couple of guys, a couple of journalists. We are on an ongoing quest. We're doing this live and in random order, and it's never been more live or more random than it is this week, because Pete, give us the wind-up of where we are, where we've been, and why it has taken us so long to appreciate our present situation.
All right. Well, now that I've come out of the processing machine and I'm back, I'm first of all, I'm really glad you didn't take that baton and do Arturo. But
no, that would be bad. There were some accents.
Might have got some comments on that one.
Do not TikTok that one.
Previously on Pull to Open, leading up to this moment, 3 episodes ago, well, actually more than 3 podcasts ago, but 3 stories we did ago, we were in the Invasion of Time, also featuring the Time Lords and Gallifrey, all about that invasion they had to repel from their own planet, the Vardans and the Sontarans. You might think there's a little bit of connection there, which we might explore at the end of the show in our regular segment of why the randomizer took us here. But you're going to have to wait for that, because the randomizer, after that adventure, took us to another, well, again, Time Lord-centric, but TARDIS-centric anyway, episode in The Doctor's Wife. Had a great conversation there, again, with guest Dave Kitchen from The Doctor Who Show. Was a really good time. And then we rocketed forward a bit to the Jodie Whittaker era, to her first season, season 11, little adventure called The Saranga Conundrum.
Yes, notable for being the first Doctor Who to mention Hamilton, and notable for almost nothing else. Hamilton and Brett Goldstein, that's your lot.
I must concur. Hamilton and eyebrows. So, and then, because the next adventure the randomizer bestowed upon us was the very one we're talking about today, the War Games, which actually happens to clock in at about 241 minutes of runtime.
Wow.
Kind of difficult to get in a schedule occupied with kids and jobs and everything else with life. It's taken us a little while, so we had a couple of side trips since then. One about rage-quitting Doctor Who, great discussion about that phenomenon, rarely talked about. We had really good engagement on that one, lots of conversation on YouTube and other places. And then we even took another side trip and talked a little bit about one of the things that features very prominently in the War Games, which is the trouble with which is Gallifrey and
Time Lords,
the Time Lords,
Time Lord Society, and the trouble with that. Yeah, that was a fascinating conversation. We, from our perspective, we just recorded that a couple of days ago, but I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad that we sort of hived off some of the War Games discussion, just basically what this is, because you discuss the whole War Games, or you discuss every implication of the Time Lord showing up and suddenly knowing the Doctor's origin. You know, we could be here all day and night. Talking about that. So I feel like taking the Time Lords out of the equation somewhat has made the Herculean nature of our task in describing this second most longest a prominent story of the classic series. It's an awesome mountain to climb.
I didn't get a chance to do my dramatic end to the previously segment. I just kind of petered out like the war games and
Oh, and by the way, it's the war game. Yeah, if you like, we could do it in the style of the show itself, and I could, because at the beginning, the war games is very unusual because at the beginning of every episode it starts off with.
Well, how about you do it and I'll set it up for you? Yeah.
The war games.
Season 6, Serial 7, The War Games.
Yes. By Terrence Dix and Malcolm Hulk in the big letters on the screen, exploding with the light display of the artillery. Yeah. Wow. We're here.
All caps letters, too.
Yes.
It's funny. Like, I think, is this the only time they do the Times
New
Roman
as well?
New Roman font?
Yeah, it's super weird because watching so many Troughton openings, I was reminded I really love the Troughton opening. Like, it's super trippy. I like the way he seems to have 3 eyes at one point. Like, they never quite do that again. But he's like super alien looking. But it's also the suckiest logo ever. It's just, it is like Times New Roman. Doctor Who, we're just going to throw this logo at you.
Yeah, it's like they finally figured out how to get typewriter fonts really, really big, and they just said, let's do that. That looks fine.
Well, we'll get to that, but here we have a good segue here into the feedback loop that we always enter at the beginning of every show.
But before we enter the feedback loop, big reminder for everybody listening: if you want
the show notes.
If you want to skip ahead to where we begin our discussion of the war games itself, TLDW, which is how we begin every commentary, where we summarize the episode in record time, check the show notes. Go ahead, go to your podcast app, go to the YouTube notes underneath the video. You'll find the exact time code prominently there, the place to fast forward to. If you're just here for the war games commentary, check that out. Go to that. Everybody else, hey, come with us here into the feedback loop.
That's right. And if you are a fan of the war games, then you're probably going to appreciate the longevity of going the long way around and the slow build-up that we're going to create here. But we have a connection because our last show, we did a poll to go with our show on the Time Lords and the sort of the discussion that kicked off with like how perfect and godlike the Time Lords are in the war games. And also various other flavors of Time Lords that have been in other Time Lord shows, like the corrupt Time Lords of Deadly Assassin, the tyrannical Time Lords or Time Lord of Hellbent when Rassilon is back in charge, or the gone daddy gone Time Lords of most of the new show, and now again they were just pretend gone before, now they're real gone.
Isn't the new term redacted?
the redacted Time Lords. Anyway, we put up a poll to go with the show, so that's why we're opening the feedback loop with Twitter, poll to open 63. And we gave you 4 options. These 4 options, like which kind of Time Lord do you prefer? Which flavor of Gallifrey are you more into? And the results are so far very interesting. The poll is still ongoing. However, we have almost a 4-way tie.
Oh, yeah.
We have slightly ahead is the corrupt Time Lords.
Okay.
28.6% of our fans like a bit of corruption, a bit of political corruption in
Deadly
there.
Assassin.
Deadly Assassin style.
That's first past the post here in our poll.
That is first past the post. I almost want to say if I'd sort of put Invasion of Time in there instead of Deadly Assassin in the parentheses, maybe that would have dragged the vote down a little bit.
Not if you're me.
But yeah, tyrannical Time Lords and disappeared redacted Time Lords are on 25% each. Nice. Amazing. And then bringing up the rear are the godlike Time Lords of the War Games.
Oh, interesting.
Which may just be a reflection on that black and white costume, which people are not into.
Well, I would also say that the more Doctor Who there is, I think the less the godlike stuff works.
Yes.
So I think it would be hard to desire that a lot, given everything that's sort of come since and If you want to unlock any potential in anything, you've got to change it up.
Well, to that point, very interesting reply from Sleeping Dalek, a fan of the show, Patrick, who said he liked godlike and corrupt. You can do both very easily and have interesting and wildly different stories occurring within those states, which, yeah. And then I believe Bob, who was the guy who turned us on to Gallifrey, reminded us that we need to listen to Gallifrey.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's going to be in our list. Stephen Arkley, a very interesting comment. I like the idea of Gallifrey staying destroyed, but pockets of Time Lords still being around, which is sort of how the show has treated the Daleks, right?
Yeah, bad. So, I guess. I feel like that drifts quickly into the problem Star Wars has with Order 66 and then A New Hope.
Pockets of Jedi, yeah.
Then there's like, did any Jedi get killed in Order 66? You're thinking like Ahsoka survived, and obviously all these other like Obi-Wan, etc. So yeah, you don't want. Yeah, that's an issue.
But apart from that, what did the Romans ever do for us? Yeah, it does. It just started to get that feeling. And then one final comment from the Chosen One, longtime fan of the show, who says all of the above. They see themselves as gods. The Doctor sees them as quibbling politicians. I think Tyrant is the most accurate, as it's got elements of both. Gone is another conversation. It really worked for a time, but in my opinion, we shouldn't keep all Time Lords off the table forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's going to be a challenge for the show going forward, right?
I've never listened to Gallifrey, but I have read a book called The Infinity Doctors, which was kind of a very sort of notable it was one of the BBC books. But Infinity Doctors is notable because it tries to incorporate all the elements that you see on screen about Time Lords and Gallifrey, and it sort of reveals just how contradictory they all are. Yeah. So it's an interesting sort of footnote in all of this. I don't think it's really referred to much anymore, just mostly because it just doesn't fit. One of the big things is it's really ambiguous which Doctor it is. They never say, and that's on purpose. But then at the same time, because it's never pinned down, you kind of shrug after you read it. Like, okay, was that an imaginary story? Was it a dream? It's notable. I think it's worth reading just if you're a Doctor Who fan, but it's
Infinity Doctor.
It doesn't really add a lot to the canon. It just sort of reflects it back, and suddenly it's this M.C. Escher drawing of Gallifrey, which is kind of neat.
Well, a big fan of MC Escher, a big fan of Gallifrey, and thanks everyone for commenting on that. We will, the poll is still ongoing, so we will check back in again next week with some final results.
Okay. Moving on in the feedback loop. Hey guys, don't you like it when we don't tell you to review the podcast right away? Well, we're doing it second now. So, hey, if you are a fan of Pull to Open and for whatever reason you have not reviewed the show either in Spotify, where you can leave a rating, or in the Apple Podcast app, where you can leave a full review, we are asking you to please do so now, because those reviews and ratings really help the show. It makes it more visible to other folks in the app. The only thing I would say is better than doing that is sharing the podcast directly with a friend. So if you know anyone else who likes Doctor Who, or might like Doctor Who and might want to start, doesn't know where to start, hey, this is a podcast that'll just take you on a random journey throughout the whole thing. You can pick what you like and, leave aside what you don't. So go ahead, just share the podcast. That would be amazing. By the way, if you're leaving a review or a comment anywhere on social media, one of the things we really, really like to do, it's kind of our signature thing, is get titles of Doctor Who stories in emoji form. So, for example, you might like the episode Smile. Just give us a smile emoji. Pretty easy, that one.
Smile.
We already know that one, but some of the other ones aren't as obvious. And I'm going to demonstrate that now.
Oh boy! Oh god!
Something we like to call the Whomoji Challenge.
Oh boy! Okay.
This is the part of the show where I describe an emoji to Chris, and he guesses which Doctor Who story it is. And we're trying to keep track of how many hints, how long it takes him.
Yes, and I'm doing this live without a net. I'm not looking at our list of all 301 stories in Doctor Who canon. I'm just going on memory.
Specifically put these in a secret Google Doc that he knows nothing about.
That's right.
Okay, so
it's come after us, quiz show committees.
Are you ready, sir, for this week's emoji challenge?
No, but let's do it anyway.
Okay. So, this has a lot of emojis, just so you know.
Oh, God. Okay.
So I don't think it's that sounds scary, but it's going to be relatively easy to keep track of. So
look, nothing's going to be scarier than the TLDW this week, so that's why I'm feeling kind of immune. Yeah.
Well, this will be a good warm up. Okay, so here we go. There's something like 20 emojis, but here's the first one.
Okay.
Traffic light.
Okay.
And emojis 2 through 15, I think it is, are different kinds of cars. Red car, blue car, race car, police car, cab, another blue car, another cab, another red side, blah, 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 blah. You get the point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Is it perhaps gridlock?
It's gridlock!
Yay!
See?
Fantastic.
Was actually not too hard. Wait,
I actually
need one hint.
I didn't even need a hint. I actually like this because I wrongly guessed gridlock a few weeks ago. On we were doing The New Earth, was it?
Yeah.
Was someone who sent that one? And I guessed gridlock because there was a cat person in it.
Yeah, because there was the cat right in the hospital.
Yeah, in the hospital, and that connected with gridlock to me more. But now I can just say that I was just early. I wasn't wrong. I was just early.
There you go.
You know, exactly. It feels very doctorish when you get the question wrong in a quiz. It's just because you gave the right answer, but for 2 weeks ahead of time.
You were basically playing Idris. You know, you got it right.
Yes.
The timing was off. 10 says,
yes.
Difficult, aren't they?
Yes, goodbye. I mean, hello. Which one of those comes first? Yes.
All right, great job.
Thank you.
By the way, comes to us from longtime fan of the show, Dalton 1963 on Twitter. You can be just like Dalton. Go ahead and leave us a Doctor Who story title in the form of emoji on Twitter or in anywhere else. You could leave it as a review, or you could leave it as a comment on our Instagram, which is also PullToOpen63. A comment on YouTube. We are at youtube.com/PullToOpen or Facebook. We are also PullToOpen63 there. But of course, one of the best places to leave a review or comment is on TikTok, and that is at Pull2Open. And we have gotten some really good comments on some of the videos we cut from the Saranga Conundrum. And I'd love to read out our TikTok comment of, I guess, the month at this point on one of those. So we cut a video about when we talked about that scene in the Saranga Conundrum where the Doctor sort of fangirls on Eve Cicero and she's like, hey, you're in the Book of Celebrants. And then she comes like, hey, wait a minute, you're the Doctor. You're in that too. And then she's all like, yeah, well, guess probably someone else. Oh, except that, it's kind of a volume, not a chapter.
It's more of a volume, really. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's a good little doctory moment. We thought it was good. And this handle on TikTok, it's Natty. Not sure if that's boy, girl, something else. But Natty says, it's moments like this one that make me wish Jodie got a capable writer. Hope she agrees to some big finish in the future. Which I think, totally, I like this comment because it reflects my view on the Saranga Conundrum, which Jodie Whittaker is the best thing about it. She puts in a great performance. She has a lot of good lines. And
can really nail a good comedy line as well. Like, she has the comedy chops, I think, that Chibnall was always quite, kind of reaching for, but never quite hit in the way that RTD and Moffat do comedy.
Yeah, totally. Especially Moffat. Yeah. Moffat is really, that rapid fire dialogue. Sometimes he's a little too in love with his own dialogue, but there's no question no one does it better than him.
I wonder. Yeah, Jodie doing Moffat's dialogue would be very interesting.
And I was also glad to see that this comment got a lot of likes. It got a couple dozen likes. So since a lot of people obviously agree, it was good to see some love for Jodie. And some of the replies were very thoughtful. And one of the other commenters mentioned, basically recommended there's a run of comics about the 13th Doctor, I guess by Jodie Houser. I've never read them, but I love getting recommendations like these through the fans. Now I want to. If there was it sounds like there was a really good writer who might have maybe even been a good TV writer had they been.
Yes. Jodie Hauser. Big fan of her on Twitter. And definitely read some of her Doctor Who scripts. Really great stuff. And I do think the comic book run for the 13th Doctor in general was pretty epic. Nice. It did a lot of things that the show didn't. So highly recommend it. But yeah, I like that comment. I like that we're pointing out that we are really quite often here on Pull to Open trying to focus in on the stuff that we like. Yes, we may occasionally get carried away on our rants about what we don't like. And, we both had our issues with the Chibnall era, as a lot of people did. But we don't, we're not letting that lead to hate in our hearts. We are focusing as much as we can on the positive stuff, like this line, which just is one of those beautiful Doctor Who moments that says so much, gives you so much headcanon about the Book of Celebrants, right? It almost becomes a real thing in your head at that point. You're almost ready to send away for the Book of Celebrants for the low cost of $78.99 for easy payments. It becomes almost a real thing in your head when she fires back with, it's a whole volume. We will, to quote The Last Jedi, not to get even more controversial with it, but we win by saving the things we love, not by fighting the things we hate.
Perfect. All right. Okay, Last Jedi haters, don't hate on us for that. We're just making a reference. All right.
Hate on me at Future Boy. You've directed me all your hate before in the Star Wars world, but yeah, bring it on up.
Okay, closing out the feedback loop, we are going to just remind everyone, hey, we're on Spotify, and I think a lot of listeners listen on Spotify. Not only can you rate the show and rate each episode, so please do both, but in addition to that, every time we talk about a Doctor Who story, as everyone knows, we rate it with our trademark Pull to Open rating system, everything from a Viscount banger, which is the best of the best, all the way down to an Ogron, which we save for the worst episodes of Doctor Who. But you get your say. You too can rate it one of these 5 ratings. And we have some results from one of our recent episodes. So we have results for the Doctor's Wife. And if you'll remember, we had kind of a 3-way split on that with Dave. So
we did, yeah.
You are on the high end. You thought it was a Viscount banger. I thought it was a Dalek, because even though it was extremely enjoyable, got so many things right, I just didn't think it was really about anything other than Doctor Who itself. And Dave called it a fixed point in time, just basically something unrateable. That we, for whatever reason, it just sort of exists outside for either for us or for just generally outside of the sort of Doctor
and
Who.
it kind of is in Doctor Who canon, right? Like an episode very much designed to be outside the norm. Yeah.
So here are the results. So basically, there is an even split. It's a neck and neck between Viscount banger and Dalek. You and I have just completely polarized the fan base, clearly. So that's interesting. There's 9%, actually, almost 10 that got rated a Professor Hater.
Whoa.
It's a distant third on that the number 1 place tie for Viscount banger and Dalek. So not that many people did the Hater, but still significant. Still like 9%.
But a Hater rather than an Ogron.
And a Hater, to remind, is that it's not a great episode of Doctor Who, but at least we learned something, which is, I don't know. This seems like a great episode of Doctor Who. But anyway, whatever. Everyone think what they want. No one rated it an Ogron, and no one rated it a fixed point in time.
Interesting.
So Dave stands alone.
Well, interesting. I'm glad that we are causing a division in fandom between this episode was really good and this episode was awesome. Like that's the kind of divide I can get along with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about the love.
How much love do we have in our hearts for this episode? I have more love than you. Anyway.
All right, we're grabbing the controls on the TARDIS, even while the Axons try to grab control of us, and we have pulled out of the time loop. No, the feedback loop. And
wow,
back in the universe.
Reaching back for that Axon reference, my goodness.
And we're just back in the universe, and the universe has now more content of Doctor Who in it. And it's not really a lot of content. It's only a teaser trailer for what's happening in November this year, but it's out there. So we've just We're recording this just the day after the Eurovision finals. They had this teaser of Doctor Who, which was not just a teaser, but a title reveal.
Yeah, we got 3 titles.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very exciting. One of them has already been a Doctor Who story. That's the Star Beast. Famously, the exact name of the 1980 comic with Beep the Meep.
Because it's like, why not do this?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Why
It
not?
hasn't been used.
And it basically does appear to be replicating that story almost in everything that we saw in this trailer. The spaceship coming in, but also that basically they have the Sharon-like character from that story, but it appears to be that the new Rose is now in that role.
Right. I guess. Because you see her with the Doctor, and this is the other thing. You see the Doctor with Rose, and you see the Doctor with Donna. So you definitely, of course he's going to interact with these characters, but it is kind of interesting to sort of see them in, even if it is a split second of context, in context of the show. Because you see the Doctor with Rose in the sort of crowd. It looks like he says something about that's a spaceship, or that spaceship is crashing, and I forget exactly what the line is, but
so it's interesting because it's sort of a mashup of the Star Beast, the comic book story, and Aliens of London, right? Is where he and Rose are standing watching the spaceship come in. So it sort of feels like this seems like super large amount of evidence that the Doctor's universe is sort of just crashing in on itself, right? Things are getting super weird. All of his stories are coming together. I think we're sort of being deliberately pointed towards the comic book. As this is sort of as I was saying, it's a Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of scenario. All of the Doctor's different realities are coming crashing together. And I hope I'm not spoiling it too much by saying this, but hope I'm not too on the nose.
We have another 7 months or so to go. So I mean, we're going to spoil something for ourselves, given how much time we have just to think about it. It's almost like the infinite universe law. You'll eventually run into the thing, but by virtue of doing everything, and then Doctor Who fans' minds go, faster than anything in the cosmos. So we're just going to go for every possible.
As we have just demonstrated by not even giving you the second 2 titles. The Wild Blue Yonder, by the way, and The Giggle.
Yeah. And so the Wild Blue Yonder, and it's interesting how they sliced the titles and showed scenes, but I think they're deliberately mixing it up. You know what I mean? I don't think necessarily that the scenes that follow the titles are the same scenes from those things.
100%. Although maybe in the second case, that does feel like a story too, where it's the Doctor is talking to somebody on Earth about the Celestial Toymaker coming. Basically,
right? There's no explicit reveal on any of this stuff. You just see Neil Patrick Harris again in his sort of weird makeup, and sort of dancing to himself. Strangely, there's a bit. I could be wrong about this because there were such quick, and I only saw it once or twice. But I think there's a bit in those tiny, really short teasers that isn't in this teaser, which is that he's sort of juggling in that, which isn't much. But anyway. And he's here kind of dancing. There's a bit where the Doctor's in a room. This is kind of one of the bigger reveals. And it looks almost like some people have said online, is it unit headquarters? Is it, he looks like he's in some kind of base or control room. And to be honest, I got to say, it looks a little bit like unfinished footage, or deliberately unfinished footage, because he's the only one in this big room. And it reminds me a little bit of when they were doing trailers and teasers for Spider-Man No Way Home, and they had to kind of edit out the other Spider-Man or some of the villains.
And we already know RTD is doing that because he's already admitted to doing that with the shooty footage. Somebody can tell me what the hell is going on. That is a deliberately fake background. That's not what's going to be there. So he's already doing it for that. I'm sure he's doing it for the trailers as well.
Well, and notably, Shooty was not in any of this. So that tells you one of two things. Either they're really sort of saving that, and he's in it, but he's not going to be in it a lot, certainly, at least not till the end of it. So maybe he's in it, and they're just sort of keeping that under wraps for a bunch of reasons, or that he's really not in it much at all. Maybe he's really not in it much at all until the end. My view is sort of somewhere in between. I mean, obviously, this is Tennant's time to sort of come back and pull in a mass audience and sort of get everyone excited about Doctor Who again. But I think there's going to be a bit of a timey-wiminess here, right? Because, and I'm really interested to see how he squares this circle, because he can't really start right at the end of Power of the Doctor, because that's what the comic book was supposed to do. The comic strip
Exactly.
did. So he's going to have to do something different. If unless if you believe him that the comic is now part of continuity, I don't know why you wouldn't. So you're going to have to open with something else, and I feel like. I don't know if it's going to be quite. You're probably wondering how I got here.
Exactly. Record scratch, freeze frame. You're wondering how I got here. Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely going to start in media res. I think we may have already heard the first words with the teaser trailer where he says, I don't know who I am anymore. Like that feels like a very early on in the first episode kind of thing. But anyway, we're guessing here we'll find out. Big shout out to anyone who has just sort of, we're getting the SEO on the War Games here. If you're looking for the War Games commentary in like 2024 and beyond, you're going to really enjoy this segment where you're like, oh, they didn't even know. They were in for so much that they didn't even know. So yeah, I guess we shouldn't necessarily linger on it for too long, but I'm super excited. I'm excited. Did you also know, did you notice the Easter egg about the binary that appears on one screen? Like when all the glitchiness happens and the transmission things and stuff is redacted and all of that, overlay on the screen. There's one point where there are binary numbers where if you translate it and run it backwards, it says, I don't want to go.
Oh, my.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he's going to say that or if he'll flip that. I bet maybe once he it's time for me to go.
It's time for me to. That'll be his last slide. It'll be something like that. There'll be not a dry eye in the house. Tennant is finally ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Oh, guys, we could do the teaser take apart episode of Pull to Open now. I think we kind of just did, but we're going to have to start talking about the War Games at some point, and
yes,
that
we are.
point is now with our segment, our regular segment. It's a new segment that it's 5 minutes. I'll tell you that, because TLDW, everyone. Too long didn't watch. Too long Doctor Who, where we summarize the story of a Doctor Who episode in record time, is right now, and it falls to one Chris Taylor, who is allotted 30 seconds per classic series episode to summarize the War Games, and that gives you now record-setting 5 minutes for TLDW.
All right, time for me to do the line. 5 minutes? That's ages. What if I get bored or need a television, couple of books? Anyone for chess? Bring me knitting.
Well,
that's my Paul McGann, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, I guess we're just doing impressions this week. Wow, it's a whole new thing on Pull to Open. Yeah, I will say this before we get into this. I'm expecting a terrible performance, and here's why. Because I watched the War Games almost immediately. You obviously had a lot of stuff going on. Like I was surprised that I did this. I thought, well, 10 episodes, I'm obviously going to need to spread it out. Once I got to like episode 4, I was so hooked. I was like, I can't spread this out one a day. Like, no, I gotta plow forward, find out what happens. So it's been a while.
Gotcha. There's a gap.
And I remember a lot. I just don't necessarily remember the order of a lot. So once I'm through this TLDW, I will feel a lot. I'll unclench. I'll feel a lot better. But like, just I can so see myself getting caught up in just being totally confused about the order of stuff, and getting too deep into it, which is a common TLDW problem.
Yeah, I like your chances of finishing it off this time. I think certainly I've seen it more recently. I did pace it out, so I haven't seen it all recently. But those middle episodes, like I would have a hard time figuring out what happened before what. We'll get into it, but I wouldn't say it's the most repetitive Doctor Who episode, but there is definitely some repetition in the middle part. But let's get on with it. It is time to get on with it. All right. Are you ready, sir?
As I'll ever be. I'm going to stop my own timer here, and so I can watch myself counting down to oblivion. All right, ready.
All right, secure all war zones. It is time for the official pull to open summary of the War Games. In 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe arrive in the TARDIS in what appears to be World War One, and it's all trench warfare. And the Doctor's explaining how horrible trench warfare was, but no, they get captured by Germans, or the Germans capture an ambulance, and then the ambulance. There's a woman named Lady Jennifer who's driving the ambulance and takes it back to HQ. I think the Germans get lost at some point. Anyway, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe end up at HQ, and they are interrogated as spies, and there's this General Smythe, and he kind of leans on the rest of his tribunal, the Doctor's tribunal, to make it to convict them, even though like there's suspicious stuff going on with Smythe, and he has his office, and in his office there's a camera, and he's talking. It's completely anachronistic stuff in his office there, but he seems to be able to pull it over everyone by looking at them through their glasses. So the Doctor, we think he's got shot, but no, it's actually someone else is attacking at the same time, interrupting his execution, and Zoe liberates him, and Jamie gets thrown in prison with a red coat, and he and the red coat fight, but then they realize that they're better off together, and then they dupe a guard, and then they get out, but the red coat gets shot, and meanwhile Zoe and the Doctor's now pretending to be an examiner again, and he's talking to this other general, and basically there's a lot of shenanigans, but ultimately with Lady Jennifer and Carstairs, this lieutenant, both of whom sort of remember that they're not really in this isn't really World War One, and that they go in this ambulance through to another war zone. It's the Romans. Oh my God, what's going on? They're in this huge war zone-y thing, and they get this map stolen from General Smythe's headquarters, and it's the square in the middle that they've got to get to. That's where the whole operation is, with someone called the Warlord, who turns out to also be a Time Lord. And there's the security chief who talks a lot like that. And then there's the War Master. The War Master is the one who's the Time Lord, and there's the Warlord who's not a Time Lord. The Warlord is in charge of all this, and it's actually this alien race of planets, alien race who are basically putting different areas of Earth warfare. And they are running the whole thing secretly behind the scenes, and they've all got glasses, and there's this German guy who uses a monocle, but he's also actually in the American Civil War zone, and he kind of uses that monocle several times, but ultimately he gets captured by the Resistance, which Jamie is hooked up with, and the Resistance contains a lot of soldiers from different war zones who've sort of remembered and are banding together, and meanwhile the Doctor and Zoe are with them for a little bit, but then they find a side rat, which is one of these time machines that the runners of the war games have been using to bounce around. So they get inside one, they go to HQ, and they sort of set in on a scientist who's trying to sort of change the memory of the soldiers and get them to be in their war zone, as it were. And the Doctor pretends to go under, but he's not, and then other people pretend to go under. Yeah, basically the whole Resistance gets captured, and they're pretending to have been reconditioned. But what is happening? We're getting mentions of Time Lords starting in episode 6, and then the Time Lords are coming up because the Doctor realizes that he can't fix this all by himself. And he has a lot of chat with the War Master about this. War Master doesn't want him to bring in the Time Lords, but the Doctor's like, no, this is the only way to sort it out. They actually fix it all by themselves, but they cannot get the soldiers back to their time zones without the Time Lords. So he makes a Time Lord cube, brings the Time Lords in, tries to make a break for it, and just sort of leaves everyone there, even his friends in the Resistance. But Jamie and Zoe insist on coming in, and they try and escape in the TARDIS, but the Time Lords have got them, and they're create a force field about the TARDIS.
4 minutes,
The Doctor tries multiple times, but he can't get away. And it's time for the trial. It's the trial of the War Master first, the Warlord first. And he tries to escape, but he can't. And the Doctor tries to escape, but he can't. Jamie and Zoe get sent back to their time zones, and the Doctor goes on trial himself for interfering. And the Time Lords say that his exile is on Earth. That's his punishment. He's going to have to change face. And he says they can't do that to him, but they change it anyway.
Time.
And then
nicely done.
And then there's season 6B.
There's not. That never happened. Only a theory. We can talk about that.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
You got it, though.
Man, okay. Can I have a 5-minute break right now? Can you just talk for the next 5 minutes? I'm just going to catch my breath here. Wow.
That was all good. I can't remember if you mentioned Arturo, the Mexican guy.
Arturo Villa, yes.
Yeah.
Who tries to shoot the Doctor in the back. He's sort of just part of the resistance, right?
Right. It's a very memorable part, though.
Yes, very memorable part. Very part that you wouldn't necessarily have today. Somewhat cliched,
might say. Done a little better. But you also seem to get a little mixed up on the titles of the aliens and the War Master, or he's not even.
Oh, God, that is so confusing.
Totally understandable that you called him the War Master, because the War Chief is his title.
War Chief, yes.
He's clearly a prototype for the Master.
Yes.
It's so to the point, if you've seen any Doctor Who since this episode, you think, is that the Master? It's got to be the Master. He looks kind of like the Master.
Oh, God, yeah, that's such a mistake, though. We're going to have to put, a subtitle on the TikTok when we do that. Actually, asterisk, War Chief.
So the War Chief, Security Chief, and the Warlord. But yeah, otherwise, I think you hit all the right beats. There's a lot of back and forth. There's resistance. There's all these zones, etc. It's a twisty, turny story. And
it is, with a little bit of padding. It's fair to say that there's some padding.
I think,
but you don't mind the padding, do you?
You don't mind the padding? No, I think it's really, the thing is, it's just kind of shocking how good the War Games is, and given its length, and like I said before, it's something like 4 hours of Doctor Who is 241 minutes. It's basically watching 2.5. This is basically a Doctor Who miniseries. But it really works. It's not boring, even if it is repetitive. You said earlier around episode 4, you were like, I just got to keep watching this. What happens? Because they do such a good job of giving you a little bit in each episode, even right off the bat, from the moment you see Smythe in his sort of base, and he's got the anachronistic video screen and all this stuff, something's up.
Yes.
And you want to see what it is, and you get bit by bit a little more and a little more until about halfway through, when you kind of get the picture of it with the map and the all these zones, and the side rats show up. And then at that point, you're getting these hints that there's not just more to it. There's something to do with the Doctor and the TARDIS, right? Because that just the noise the side rats make. You're just
which is nice it's nice and subtle. You know what it sounds like? A TARDIS not with the handbrake on. Exactly. TARDIS, how it should be piloted, but it's subtly close. So you can listen to this and unless you're a hardcore, if you're a casual fan, you could listen to that noise and be like, sounds a bit familiar, but you wouldn't necessarily connect it to the TARDIS, which is nice. And that's the subtlety of the War Games all over. You're absolutely right. It builds and it builds and it builds. And at first you're thinking, oh, this is 1917. The Doctor has gone to World War I for the first time. Why wouldn't he? Oh, wait, this isn't clearly this, clearly there's something anachronistic here, you start to realize, with the video screen. And Smythe is just such a wonderful villain. Oh my goodness. And works on two levels, right? It's sort of that sort of aristocratic, overbearing, kind of, literally looking down on everyone, looking through his glasses at them. You really believe that he can hypnotize them. So he's kind of an asshole World War I general, which is bad enough. We definitely read them as villainous, through our various media around World War I, right? The generals being completely back from the action and just sending men to their deaths. and there's something alien going on with him.
Yeah.
Although I will say, my first nitpick with the War Games, he really should have locked his office door.
Yeah.
Everyone gets into his office and just keeps discovering his alien technology.
Yeah, there's a lot of why didn't they just bits. And then, like I say, I'm forgiving of those if I think of them afterward. It's hard to know because I've seen the War Games, decades ago. I can't remember what I was thinking in the moment. I think, I probably was thinking about why didn't they do this or that. You're kind of more willing to forgive it in an older episode like this. Also, like because the story is so good and because you just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to go with it.
Exactly it, and that's how you know it's a good story. If the story is making you, and Neil Gaiman, speaking of the Doctor's Wife, we were talking about Neil Gaiman a couple of weeks ago. He has this wonderful kind of shorthand for how in his masterclass, which I've written about, his masterclass on writing, how to do a story, basically, is you just sort of, at every moment you stop to yourself and think, would my, he was talking about his 4-year-old kind of bouncing on the couch, being like, what happens next? What happens next, Daddy? Tell me. That's what you want your reader to be, like, just in that sort of, I don't care what happens, like, even there may be some incongruities in your story. What happens next? What happens next? And the genius of the War Games, you're always wondering what happens next because the scope is slowly expanding. And even when it gets to as big as, we're now in the futuristic HQ, that's where it does sort of drag a bit, like the security chief is his voice, like people are sort of unanimous in saying, like, that's the worst part of the War Games, is the fact that actor did not vary his voice and he kind of sounds like a Dalek.
Okay, we could get on that, right? I don't mind it, honestly. Like, I kind of like it because it is memorable and distinctive, and I think because he's kind of going for that sort of semi-fascist scientist type, the brains behind the operation kind of thing. I think he's really trying to emphasize that, and that works, even though I think it's a choice most actors wouldn't make today. It was a bold choice, risky choice. I like it. I understand why most people don't, but it certainly makes the War Games that much more memorable. I'll say that.
It certainly does, and maybe you sort of need those off notes in a story as overall good as this one, just to point out the perfection of the structure. But yeah, even once you're then in that HQ, it keeps building, and the war chief comes in at the right time, but then you don't get the warlord. You get lots of mentions of the warlord until the warlord comes in, so you're kind of interested in him. And he's also doing an interesting choice, which is to be really quiet. Yeah. To be that kind of like man who is so used to having his orders obeyed that he knows he can be very quiet, which is in stark contrast to literally everyone else in a position of authority. And
that's a great choice in this one. I think that's very defensively great. So I have more to say about all the bad guys and all that, but I think we should sort of back up so give a little more background on this story. And it basically, this comes at the end of season 6. Doctor Who is kind of struggling to keep up with itself. It's sort of coming apart at the seams in some ways, and ratings are falling. It's notable that this story was very low rated at the time. Some of the lowest ratings.
Lowest since The Smugglers, I believe.
Yeah, for one of them. To be fair, it sort of varies, and it actually bounces back up, especially at the end, to about 5 million viewers, which still isn't that good for the show.
So certainly not in the 60s.
So originally it was supposed to be, I think, 2 stories. There was going to be a 4-parter and a 6-parter. And basically for it says an age-old story of Doctor Who running out of time, things aren't workable, and so they rely on the people who have historically given them good stuff in a short period of time. In this case, Malcolm Hulke and Terrence Dicks, who was still fairly new at the time, I think. And they got together.
Knew it. That was the important thing. He was new and he knew it. Like, not like Douglas Adams, who came in, we looked at Destiny of the Daleks, where he comes in, oh, I know how to do this. I'm just going to rewrite Terry Nation and make it funny. He didn't, Terrence Dicks did not have that arrogance. He was like, no, I need help.
Right.
On this one. And he got Malcolm Hulke.
And they got it together and basically wrote a 10-parter Well, it's not the longest Doctor Who. Certainly, I mean, Dalek's Master Plan is famously longer. Trial of the Time Lord ended up being longer if you count that as all one story. But it is one of the longest serials they ever made. And
it wouldn't necessarily have stood up to scrutiny, I think, if you had a different TARDIS team. Because I've said before, I think that this is one of the strongest TARDIS teams in history. I don't think it gets much better than Troughton and Fraser Hines and Wendy Papri. You know, the Dr. Jamie and Zoe. They are, I mean, there's a distinct connection between Doctor Who and the Beatles in the 60s, right? Because they both became famous around the same time. They both started at the same time, and Troughton certainly always had, and the Beatles actually appear right in the chase very briefly, stock footage or whatever. But like, there's a scene where they're running here. In the war games, the three of them, and they actually almost look like there's. It almost looks like they're filming A Hard Day's Night, like it's from above, and you sort of, well, it just sort of like several of the scenes of them running around about episodes 2 or 3 on location shots, where that's the other thing is like they're clearly they work so well together, and the director clearly knows like how to frame them by now, and they know how to like they're just on point throughout all of this. But like, you sort of realize at one point, oh, they've all got mop tops, like, and they're running. Like, I definitely got A Hard Day's Night vibes from that, and they really are. They just sort of have that same thing of the Beatles of like being funny,
right,
but effortlessly so, right? Not not where you can hear the grinding gears like with Chris Chibnall trying to be funny, but like just they got it. They're witty, it's snappy. It's like it's all of their dialogue sounds like it's off the cuff, and they've got their things, and they do and it's just so perfectly. Their characters so well, and they make a great combination with Carstairs and Lady Jennifer.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, this is the cool thing. I think this is just the right size for this story. I mean, even though the story's super long, you would think a bigger TARDIS team this might be kind of a good episode for that, right? If you think of like Whittaker's group or whatever. But I feel like I think you're dead on in that if you have the Doctor with a companion, that's your template. It's fine. But if you have two, you can have some more fun separating them, contrasting them. I mean, we saw this a little bit with Ben and Polly and the Smugglers. I thought that was one of the better parts. And if they have room to do interesting things as they do here, so when they're sort of separated and when they're particularly when they're separated from the Doctor and they need to sort of be the ones to rally the resistance together. And so
it's good for Jamie in that respect. That's a really good role for him. Yeah,
it's great for both of them. I feel like she leads him along and she gets to show how she's still the brains of the operation, but he rises to the occasion. There's a line he has that's actually very memorable because she's leading the whole conversation, and then he actually has a good thing to say on his own, which is like, you're getting nowhere. Just, doing these petty little skirmishes on the sidelines. I mean, you need to attack them in force. And so they all kind of like, everybody gets something to do there. And there's a lot of that humor too. I mean, like that bit where he has some very interesting, archaic ideas about women, and Jamie ribs her a little bit. Oh, him sounds like a nice guy. It's like, but that's exactly what you would say if you're Jamie from 1745, right? Yeah. I mean, like, it's all.
We should add that Jamie in this was so well drawn and such a clear character that even someone like I'm going to butcher her name, Diana Galbadini, the woman who wrote Outlander, was inspired by the War Games.
Oh, interesting.
And was inspired specifically by the character of Jamie, and that's why her main character is called Jamie. And it was specifically watching the War Games that led to Outlander. So in a way, Jamie McCrimmon lives on in this whole other franchise, even though he loses his memory here.
Yeah, the more you know.
But the fact that the TARDIS team is so on point, right, is it makes it all the more heart-wrenching later on where they lose their memories. And we discussed that briefly last week. But, the fact that they're only left with their first memory of the Doctor, and they go to the trouble of reconstructing the wheel in space for Zoe. And,
they even recast or bring back the one of the guest cast from that story. They probably just, I don't know if they filmed it at the end of that story or whatever. I'm sure they didn't rebuild the sets or whatever. Maybe they knew what they were doing. But
that wouldn't have had
neat.
such impact without them being so good together, all three of them throughout. And yeah, I think the way the TARDIS team works that a lot of others doesn't is that Zoe is as smart as the Doctor. So you can have her split off from the Doctor, have Jamie go off and have his own adventure, and have her and the Doctor bounce off each other at the same level, in a way that would later work with Romana so well. That we haven't really seen a lot of. Doctor Who in general has been a little bit too afraid, I think, to have its companions be as smart as the Doctor.
Yeah, they can be feisty, but they can figure things out on their own. I think that's okay. I mean, they shouldn't be as smart as the Doctor, to be honest, I feel, in that, the Doctor is still the star of the show. And that's what I'll say. Like, this is a tight TARDIS team, but it never forgets Troughton is the star.
Right.
And he has good lines, interesting things to do throughout. And I think it's one of the better Doctor-y moments of his run is in the war base, I guess. There's that sort of I would say is kind of a weak spot of the script, the university scene where the scientist is telling everyone about how they're prosecuting people, and it's weak writing because they don't seem to have figured out any other way to do this key exposition other than literally having a class on what the plot is.
Yeah, so, we should, by the way, we should mention, because I don't think I got this in TLDW, because there's so much going on in that base. This is a scene where there's a scientist character who is demonstrating how to decondition, or what do they call it? They call it conditioning, right? Of these soldiers. So processing.
Pardon me.
Processing. Yes, all of the scientists and all of the people in the base speak with impeccable British accents.
Well, like I was saying,
demonstration of the process.
Yeah, but it's this scene where they're literally teaching the plot to.
Yes.
So it's very much hand holding the audience. But the good thing about it, the saving grace of it, is at the end of it, the Doctor steps up and is kind of takes command of the whole thing. And so it becomes a very good sort of Patrick Troughton scene because he's being indignant and too clever and annoying to the guy, but he's also right. And so he sort of wins him over a little bit as a fellow scientist. And all of that just makes total sense. And Troughton gets some really good lines in there as well. And he looks somehow he's the only guy those glasses work on.
Yes, the glasses we should mention with the little crosses in them. I actually really like those. Those really super worked for me. You know what? I was getting THX 1138 vibes.
Oh yeah,
because specifically the student film version that George Lucas did before it became a big picture thing. It was stuff like this. It was like very super cheap glasses stuck on, but the overall effect. Again, exactly the same time. THX filmed in 68, the movie version filmed in 69, so it's very contemporary. It's super weird, like super cheap, super weird, super dystopian, and definitely getting the same vibes here. And even though part of it looks like it was filmed on like the Batman set, the Batman 1966 set with the circles in the background,
right? That was groovy, man. That was
groovy, man.
Swinging 60s, which you
and then the security guards come in and they're all in black PVC.
Yep. Yeah, and they're like, which you didn't see honestly a ton of that design in Doctor Who, like that overt. Like obviously it was done in the 70s, 60s, and you could tell, but that really sort of over the top, groovy, swinging atmosphere. This is probably the peak for sure in the show.
Yeah, but you're right. Troughton looks good in that. He looks good in the where he actually dresses up as a soldier in one scene. Yeah. Again, giving the lie to people who are like, Shooty Gabwa's got too many costumes. No, even Troughton would ditch the tramp outfit for, in this case, an actual war outfit, which Patrick Troughton himself would have worn. Did you know the story about how he threatened to quit if he saw another rat on the set?
Wow. Because I hadn't heard that story.
There were rats on this set, and it turned out that he had in World War II, because of course he actually did fight in World War II, he had shot rats. Like that was part of his duty. So, it was a little too close to home for him when they were filming on this rubbish dump. I think it was near Brighton that had a lot of rats in it. But yeah, throughout it, like on one level, Troughton is like he's absolutely exhausted. You can almost see it in the bags under his eyes. The filming schedule has been so hard on him.
Mm-hmm.
But on another, he is giving a masterclass in being Troughton, because episode 1, like, the Doctor is trying to be reasonable with everyone.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He's not losing his rag yet, and then he starts to realize the rules of this world require him to come in and kind of shout at people, "I'm the inspector," and he really berates the second guy, whereas he was trying to be reasonable with General Smythe, right?
Yeah, no,
But it's like the war has changed him.
Yeah, I like that, because early on he's like, well, they even say there's no reason for them to hurt us, imprison us. I'm sure we'll be fine. And then suddenly Smythe is like sentencing him to a firing squad and said he's going to throw Zoe in jail. And they're all like, what the hell? And it's kind of funny that it's like the shortest trial ever, but it is notable. He's put on trial twice in this story. Like in the episode 1, he's court-martialed and sentenced to death immediately.
And many interesting...
Episode 10,
so many interesting structural things, and not just that, but you could say this is Troughton's whole era in one story, right? Because didn't he start out in Power of the Daleks as an inspector, a fake inspector, coming in like he's doing his greatest hits, and it's really quite spectacular to see it. It's like he's just they are greatest hits of Troughton. And I just love what he does here. I love how he sort of, he does that Troughton thing of looking sort of, down and a bit sorry, where he basically admits having stolen the TARDIS for the first time in the show. Yeah. It's like, did sort of borrow it. And then he's all indignant in the next scene, like, but the Time Lords are boring. They just never do anything with their power. They never interfere.
Nobody shouts like Troughton, I mean, he's never like mad angry, but I mean, he's just does this over the top histrionic thing that he does a couple times here. That's honestly just delightful. Like, I like that. It's kind of almost a exposition scene, but I really like the bit where he deprocesses one of the folks, and then I forget what the guy, I forget the one resistance guy who's with them a lot in the last few episodes. He's like, "Well, Doctor, if we deprocess them one at a time, it'll take until Doomsday." And he's like, "Well, I'm doing the best that I can, and if you give me some better equipment, I can do a bunch at once." And he's like, oh, "All right."
It's very Troughton, but he mixes it with this sense of like I've never gotten the sense before that the Doctor cares for his companions so much. Like, the Doctor will talk about caring for his companions a lot. You don't necessarily always feel it. Here, you really feel like not even when he has to let them go, but which he does so in such a heartbreakingly, trying to give them the best send off he can manner. But like throughout, this is, fun fact, the very first episode where a Doctor kisses a companion, and it's a platonic kiss for sure. But he gives Zoe a little kiss. I think in the early scene, and it's so sweet how much he loves both of them, and you really feel that in amidst all the shouting and the being coy and the varying between those two things.
Well, I will say definitely the leaving scene again. Troughton can do it all, like that where he gets his voice and he's just resigned to them going, and it's actually a little beautiful scene with him and Zoe at the end too, where he's like, "Well, we meet again." And he's just like, "Wow. Again, time is relative." It just really, really just good moments throughout. And it's like, I've said this last week, but I'll say it again. I think it's really a sad ending if you think about it, because even if they did meet again, the bulk of their friendship has been erased from their memory, which is really unfortunate. And, you kind of like are meant to sort of think, oh, it won't be that bad because they remember their first adventure. So it sort of softens the blow a bit. But then if it sinks in, you're just like, oh, that's just, it's like not quite gone a level, but it's up there.
It's up there.
So yeah, like I actually really like, there's a retcon of this in a comic, and obviously not canon, or not, hugely canon anyway. It's in the World Shapers, where he has, Jamie comes back as basically an old hermit. Yeah. But they sort of say he remembers it all because at some point in their adventures, the Doctor had taught him how to make his mind sort of more resilient, that he could resist that sort of memory erasing stuff. And it's like, I'm going to choose to believe that. That's going to be part of my headcanon, that Jamie's just fine at the very least.
Yeah, I like that idea because it is so sad otherwise, and so unusually kind of adult for its time. Like, especially in this season where things have gone a bit silly and a bit monsterish. To have something like the War Games overall is super mature in many of its themes and in its sort of sad, almost Empire Strikes Back-ish ending, in that sense of like the bad guys kind of lose, the good guys kind of lose. I mean, the bad guys lose as well, but like everyone loses.
Well, speaking of that, I'll key in on, because I want to get sort of any negatives out of the way. I will key on one of the weaker parts of the War Games, which is the bad guys' plan. Which is to say they're getting a bunch of humans to fight each other from various wars and create an ultimate army out of that. Presumably they'll gather all the winners, they'll probably process them in some way so that they'll be their perfect soldiers and then go and conquer the galaxy somehow.
That's we'll get to that when we discuss whether the evil plot would succeed, but it is kind of, it's one of those things that you have to brush over if you're going to enjoy the War Games. It's like, don't spend your time during watching the War Games thinking about what the plot of this alien race that is never actually named is. I don't
entirely hate it, and I think it is, even though it doesn't really make much sense, it's kind of Thanos-like in its simplicity, which I do like. And I think that does work because it's like I can keep that straight in my head. Oh, they're just trying to create this ultimate army. And so it also justifies many of the plot twists or lack of them towards the end. Because when you think like, well, why don't the bad guys just do X or Y? Well, they want to keep their game intact. So they can't just go to the extremes. And they even say that at one point where they're like, let's just set off the neutron bomb and kill everybody. Well, then why were we ever here? Like, you're just wasting our whole effort. What we want to do is kill the resistance in a surgical way so that we can just keep the experiment going. So it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah. So you sort of get it. I feel like today what you would maybe add a few lines about how much this race of aliens, again, weirdly never named, how much they enjoy playing games. How much they enjoy the sport of it.
Well, and I think that's clear, right? Even though they never say that, one of my favorite scenes is actually when you see the two generals. So it's Smythe and I forget the other guy's name, but the bald guy, Von something or other, because he's German. It's funny, that guy's he's working two jobs, right? He's in the Civil War zone and he's in the 1917 zone.
Interesting, isn't it, that he's sort of a proto-Nazi as an early German, Prussian commander, and he's a Confederate leader. Interesting. Could they be connected?
Could be. I think that's more coincidence in that they clearly just wanted to use the same actors, so to emphasize there's more going on here. Again, it's sort of that building and deepening of the plot. But it's like, hey, not only do they have TVs in their walls, there's this guy can sort of play two different characters and two different generals. But again, I feel like that character has to work two jobs because he's not making enough money from the warlords or the aliens or whatever, and he's like, can I do two of them?
Yeah, that's right. He has to work twice as hard as Smythe with only one of the ocular devices. He's only got a monocle and he's got to work two jobs with it. Meanwhile, Smythe, two glasses.
But just to circle back on the point about like how they love playing games, I think it's totally true. Like, there's that great scene, and it's really well shot too, where it's shot up through the glass table, and you have Smythe and the dude, and they're basically saying like, well, I'll put my troops here and then over here, and then I'll totally slaughter yours. And it's like, wait, that's not fair. And it's like, well, yeah, but it'll test your troops' morale. It's like, well, what if I did this and put that there? Then I'll get killed and won't be fared that way. And they're clearly like, how is this at all finding the ultimate army, right? Like, they're just playing like chess and trying to one up each other. That's all it is.
But this is a wonderful metaphor, right? And it's a wonderful metaphor because it's not heavy-handed. So many metaphors around war. There's so many ways Doctor Who could have gone wrong writing an anti-war narrative, which is clearly what this is. But it manages to avoid all of them. And first of all, I just want to back up and say that a British audience, certainly watching this in 1969, would have remembered a TV movie called The War Game, singular.
Okay.
Which was banned by the BBC. It was one of the early World War III movies.
Interesting.
Like, framed as a documentary. If you can go online and watch it now, I highly recommend that you do. It's like, it's like Threads, it's like Day After Tomorrow, but from the 60s. Right. And there's so many wonderful, chilling things they do. Even though they don't really have the budget to, like, simulate a nuclear war, there are chilling things about, like, there's the one point where a guy shows what he's carrying in the cleanup afterwards, after the atomic bomb, the multiple bombs have been launched. And it's like, it's a bucket full of wedding rings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's talking about how this is what we had to do in Germany in 1945 and the bombing. Like German officials would go house to house and pick out the wedding rings. We've been doing the same thing. Look, here's my whole bucket of wedding rings. And you're like, super chilling, right? So that was so chilling, the BBC banned it.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills just remembering it now. It's so good.
Described to me.
It's so good. Actually, weirdly, it has another connection to the war games because the same director did a sort of a modern documentary approach to the Battle of Culloden in 1745.
Oh, wow.
That was another movie that he did. So there's the Jamie connection. Anyway, so you are kind of primed as a British audience to see a connected narrative here, right? Mm-hmm. Terrence Dicks is being a little bit cheeky by giving it this title. Right. Because he can get away with it. Oh, no, these are just war games. But also, you're referencing this anti-war thing that was so bad the BBC banned it. Or so, subversive the BBC banned it. And there's a lot of kind of subversiveness to this, right?
Oh,
it is an anti-war narrative. And you are seeing this metaphor for the fact that basically the generals are all on the same side, no matter what side they're on, and it's all about solidarity between the troops.
Yeah, it's genius. Yeah. It's like it sucks you in through action and the plot and it being just this sort of fun, interesting Doctor Who episode. But yeah, that 100% that scene between the two generals sort of plotting what their battle is going to be and how they're going to like enjoy it and get some benefit from it or something is just such a great bit because it really just makes the lines very stark. And I think there's a couple things that they come to here, not just that, but like the whole idea of like the soldiers banding together as a resistance against them being manipulated into war. That's number one, and you've sort of already touched on that, and that's like it's so clear. Like you're humanizing the soldiers, you're making the people in charge as the bad guys. It's genius, but not only that. I think this final trial with the Warlord, when he's put on trial by the Time Lords, and his defense, I'll be honest, it's something I thought of too before he even says it, where he goes, and it's actually like it's not a terrible argument, where he goes like the people who died in our war games would have died anyway, and because it's true, he's not wrong, like they would have. But
if he is specifically, that's sort of the first combination you get, that they're specifically plucking people who would have died anyway out of time. That's the idea?
Well, I think the idea is that I don't think they have specific death lists. I don't think that's it. I think he's saying like these two groups would have fought and there would have been mass casualties regardless, even if they're not necessarily the specific people that die in our war game. But I think the point, if it's being made, and certainly I think the conclusion that Time Lords come to is that you should still care. And you are still in charge. These people were in your custody and you just made them fight. That's really not cool, dude. That's not okay. You could have actually chosen to not have them fight. You could have done that. And
that was such a resonant message for 1969. There's the other way in which it's super subversive, right? It's not just taking on all of war. And I think you could watch the war games today and be like, so what's the big deal? Like anti-war message, because we're used to it now, especially in a World War I context. There are so many good World War I movies that have shown us the slaughter of that. Back then, not so much, although this was close enough in time. This was a very interesting point that stuck with me. The ambulance that Lady Jennifer is driving actually was a World War I ambulance. Like we're close enough in time that this war was really would have been in the memory of a lot of viewers in 1969. But also,
the actress really drove it, by the way.
Yeah, she really drove it. She really drove it. But also, of course, 1969, we're in the midst of Vietnam here. We're in the midst of the anti-war movement breaking out around the world. Like, so that sort of notion of, and it's interesting because your point about the warlord's argument there is something that was sort of cynically connected to a lot of things that people, right-minded centrist people were saying about Vietnam at the time, which is like, well, we should fight it because we'll fight the Russians somewhere. Like, better it be a Cold War thing like this, like a proxy war like this. Vietnam was very much seen as a proxy war, as the Korean War was, right? And you can see that in this metaphor, right? That the war games are the superpowers, as it were, manipulating these smaller countries to fight against each other. North Vietnam and South Vietnam were not just North Vietnam and South Vietnam; they were proxies. So, very, very good metaphor to do this, and it's almost at the level of the best sort of Star Trek metaphors of the time, right, of the original series.
Yeah, no, very, very smart the way they set the stage, and you don't even sort of it's this, take note, Christian. Like, I mean, the Orphan 55, I mean, the fact that like this and that exist in the same franchise, right? It's definitely extremes, like how to do it and how not to do it, and how definitely you should never do it with this sort of hit over the head, here's my thing, and everything is super on the nose, that you're basically just ending all discussion. Whereas this one, like, you get it, but it's not overt, and you're excited to buy the themes and excited to discuss them and then take them apart, whether or not they are 100% about all the things we talked about. Like, again, it's fiction. They're making broader points. No one's saying like every single war is depicted here or everything. It's not like 100% wrong or 100% right, but it is like there is enough stuff here to work with that you can sort of get a point of view on what's happening.
And you can definitely there's a lot of stuff that's subtle that you can pick out as well, like the fact that the Union soldier who's leading the resistance happens to be a black actor, perhaps one of the most prominent black roles, and so I think there's a scene where he's sort of trying to encourage the Confederate people that they're actually in this, mirroring of the Redcoat versus Jamie kind of scene, right? Where you see a lot of these situations where soldiers who are supposed to be bitter enemies are put next to each other. And, there's more, you can make more go on there with your headcanon than is necessarily there on the screen.
Yeah, I like
and
that
certainly
character.
Yeah.
His name is Harper. He dies way too early.
He does die way too early.
Guard attacks, I think.
Yeah.
When it's
as does the Redcoat. The Redcoat gets killed almost immediately. You think that he and Jamie are going to be like, yes, no, they really do not shy away from killing a lot of these soldiers here.
Which is great. Again, like if it would not be a realistic depiction of war if that just didn't happen, and I think you want that sort of like, oh, I'm starting to like that guy, and boom, they're gone, and it just you kind of need that to really hit home this is serious stuff.
Yeah. And there's definitely sort of caricatures of certain military types in here as well, right? Like, is it Ransom is the one who is kind of the guy who sort of just likes to kiss up to the commander and like just has a very linear way of thinking, and just whatever Smythe does is brilliant, and he gets slightly bamboozled by Carstairs, and
he gets hypnotized. He's the guy that gets hypnotized again and again. I think, right?
Yeah.
So it's like he's kind of pulled in one direction or another, but it's like at some point they need to keep reprocessing them. It's not quite reprocessing them, but I guess those crazy glasses they keep.
Yeah. And it's not because he might not necessarily need it, right? He only needs the slightest nudge to believe anything Smythe says because he's so predisposed to do that. He is the typical sort of just obeying orders kind of middle manager type. So I just love how they sell him. We have just kind of a tour de force of like bit parts here throughout the 10 episodes, including Patrick Troughton's son.
Yeah, that's right. He's Private Moore, who is sort of the orphan soldier. He's from, I forget what war he's from exactly, but I think it's one of those wars that there's actually a ton of wars represented here, more than are even on the map.
Yes.
If you wanted to inventory them, there's everything from a Greek zone, not just a Roman zone. There's also a Greek zone, a 30 Years' War zone, English Civil War zone, the 1745, Napoleon's War, Peninsular War Zone, Crimean War, the American Civil War, the Mexican Civil War Zone, I guess. Is that what that was? Franco-Prussian War Zone, the Boer War Zone, Boxer Rising, Russo-Japanese War, and of course the 1917 zone.
Which they just call 1917, which is interesting. Like just as if aliens wouldn't they call it a European war zone if you're calling it the American Civil War? Like, let's be consistent here.
It would be funny if they didn't do the joke that they eventually did in Twice Upon a Time, which is if they called it World War I zone, and then if some of the soldiers came, like, wait a minute,
World War I? They didn't lean into that, and they definitely could have done. Yeah, it's super interesting. Super love all of the situations with the resistance as well. Seeing the resistance slowly come together is another sort of what happens next moment that leads you on through here. And a slightly dud note where they take the French, the Napoleonic War soldier who comes in the end, they're trying to translate into French what it is they're doing here. And someone literally says, "What's the French for resistance?" Which maybe resistance, perhaps.
That was pretty good. Nous sommes le resistance, and like it's funny. Like, I think this is Doctor Who is sort of education in that you learn a couple of words of French, but you do learn at least a little bit about wars. At least they don't get them all 100% right, and I do like that. And I think this would have been amazing in color, by the way, because you would have seen all these different uniforms up against each other and sort of thrown together in this one group, which would have been pretty amazing to see in color. It's already pretty cool to see in black and white. One thing they didn't do, though, which is so weird because they had stock footage. Maybe that's all they had. They used the stock footage of the Romans. They use it too much, by the way, even for
they do
then. But I mean, again, I can forgive it for being 1969. But they never have a Roman soldier working with them. No, even though there's a Roman resistance leader named.
Obviously, no one had learned Latin enough. Perhaps they didn't even realize that English and French are close enough to Latin that it didn't really matter. Maybe they'd have some common words. But yeah, I don't fault them for overusing that Rome footage. So obviously, the War Games was cheaply shot, but it stretches every penny.
Right.
It incredibly, and I'm not surprised that they did a double usage of the Roman soldiers, because those scenes are amazing when you look at them and what they're doing. The way they make you think there are more soldiers there than there actually are.
Right.
Well, it's just like, 3 guys in Roman garb in every scene, but like it's shot from below. They look scary, and they're coming, it's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, they're coming up from towards a hill. You. So it's like the implication being there's 1,000 guys back there. Even though there aren't, obviously.
And the War Games does a lot of that. And just to finish that thought, right at the end, I think part of what makes the whole Time Lord planet that we don't yet know is Gallifrey so sort of weirdly convincing is like just those little the things that they have, those sort of tiny lights on stalks, which could so easily have been like the thing that we complained about in Destiny of the Daleks. Do you remember when the Daleks burst out for the first time, they get Romana, and she's just sort of standing by like a studio light.
Right. Yeah, there's a studio light in the frame.
Yeah. And what they've got like really tiny lights all over the place, and some of them like look like they could be cameras or they could be drones or something, and they're just stuck up all around the set, and it just makes it look alien enough that you ignore the fact that just the rest of it's black and they just didn't have any budget.
Yeah, totally.
And so great decisions like that throughout. Amazing work.
I wish, just to touch on the glasses again in a minute, I wish they'd sort of had more courage there, because I think they might have stopped using them about halfway through because they do look kind of silly. But I think there is a plot hole. It's not really a plot hole. It's just kind of, again, sort of lazy writing in the middle where there's no real reason why they can run around the war base completely unopposed, and there's even a security alert out for them, so the guards are supposed to be looking for them, and they're constantly never confronted and are just able to do whatever they want. There is a scene early on where the Doctor and Zoe get the glasses, and it helps them avoid the soldiers. I guess it's like having a security pass or something, which is a little convenient because they were kind of lying around. But if they had followed through with that and had them wear those with the resistance further in as kind of a way they were avoiding the guards, that would have been at least a better story reason to have the glasses and made them a little more memorable, and rather than just sort of forgotten about halfway through. And then it would have made it even groovier.
Yeah, totally groovy, man. Just going to put on these glasses, and now I'm saying peace and love, and I don't want to fight anymore. What did you think of the fridge magnets? Speaking of, perhaps may not have aged as well, the fact that they're controlling everything via fridge magnet.
Yeah, the fridge magnet technology. I'm not sure if that's alien warlord technology or is that Time Lord technology, because
the Doctor really seems to understand it, and the War Chief obviously understands it. And
yeah, that definitely didn't age well. I think, I I think it's cute. I think that some of them are hexagons.
Yeah, I love the hexagons.
There's a certain sci-fi-ness to it. I like the malleability of it. It's kind of like when I look back at Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they have these very plain screens that are completely customizable, and it's all tap, 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 tap. There's no like physical controls, which was kind of an interesting choice for that show. This is sort of trying to do that. I think in some way, it's like, okay, we're going to create something interesting and alien out of the familiar. But I think in Star Trek's case, it kind of works because there's a certain unreality to it that I think is also kind of a statement about the 24th century and how clean it is. Whereas this just kind of says it's it's your fridge. It's, you want to start sticking like notes on there and then leaving them for the next guy in the.
Yeah, that's what, it might not have been recognized as such in 1969. That's why I think that's one of those, clever effects that would have looked clever at the time, and now, this was going to be echoed later in the next season with Inferno, right? With the garage door opener that the Doctor proudly shows off.
It's like with Doctor Who. I think in most sci-fi franchises, there's this danger of doing it, something that seems really cutting edge at the time and then seems dated. They did it again and again, I'm sure, with if you remember Remembrance of the Daleks, like there's this time controller that's essentially one of those lightning bolt spheres that everyone had on their shelves, like about 6 months after it was broadcast. It was just like, I got a time controller right here. It's
sure, that's what this is.
My bookshelf. It happens.
So a few things have not aged well. The fighting has not aged well.
Has it ever? Oh my god.
Yeah, wow. I mean, even for stage fighting, it's bad. There's a lot of like the slaps don't even go anywhere near them, and the oof happens before they, so just a lot of that.
One of the reasons this took me so long to watch was because I watched it with my kids. I wanted to make sure we watched the whole thing together, and it was just sort of hard to align schedules for the past few weeks. Holy cow, was Jack not impressed by the fighting. Like, he was like, wow. Like, we actually got into almost an argument at the end of episode 7, and that's the bit where the soldiers come to the chateau and they shoot up everybody and they kidnap the Doctor and take him back to the warbase. And he was just like, what the hell? Like, how did they not shoot them, or why weren't they ready, and all this other stuff? And it was just like, that was really bad. And I was kind of like, well, they were trying to do this or that. And he was just, that just makes no sense.
What did Jack think? I know that Jack is a big history buff. How did he feel about that? About the wonderful sort of collision of time zones? That feels like that might be right in his sweet spot.
Yeah, he really liked it. He was very into it. He liked the overall story. Both my kids really enjoyed the war games. They both also thought the regeneration scene, which we can talk about, Uh, kind of, in Jack's case, it didn't ruin it for him, but he downgraded his rating based solely on the regeneration. So should we talk about the regeneration a little bit?
Let's get into it. We sort of touched on it last week with the Time Lords, but I guess not the actual regeneration itself, right? Which takes place. I mean, I'd seen it so many times, and I hadn't realized that it was sort of intentional. The Doctor gets transported to this screen.
Yeah,
like the Time Lords put him in a screen, which is just this sort of like they would never have this godlike power again. They could just literally pluck him out of the physical world and make him two-dimensional.
I mean, you could. Yeah, that's funny. Like he's two-dimensional. You're right, because he is. It's a screen on the screen because you're watching it on the screen, and so you could argue. I guess they just transmatted him into the TARDIS, and you're seeing kind of a live footage from it. I guess that's what I could infer. But,
or it could be some kind of Phantom Zone like thing. That might be my headcanon.
Well, it's clear what they're doing, right? So she goes into this thing. He's kind of twisting his face around in a way that is clearly implying he's starting to change. He lets out a noise, which I could only call a croak, which I think, like everything else aside, that's probably the worst part. Like it's kind of like a little too much to eat before your regeneration, Doctor. Like what's going on? And then he's kind of twisting his face, and he's kind of like almost talking, but then he stops. He's like, and then he splits off into like 4 or 5 different faces spinning around himself. All the faces go black, and then the Time Lords say it's time to go, and he spins and spins and spins as you sort of described from the novelization, and cut to credits. And
he says, "You're making me giddy," which is a little bit of a step to a childish kind of situation.
And my kids basically burst out laughing during this. Like they just couldn't hold it in. Like that is just so silly and dumb. And I will say, after the regeneration in the 10th Planet, it's a little surprising they went this way, because the 10th Planet regeneration is really good. I mean, the lights go up, and then he's sort of in the same position, and then they go down again, and it's sort of a flash, and he's this other guy. Really,
he totally could have done that.
Yeah,
totally could have done that with Pertwee, and they could have done it. Like a lot of people point out that Pertwee wasn't actually chosen at that point. Well, yeah, but Pertwee was actually chosen when they were filming some of the other Time Lord scenes. So the thing right at the end, weirdly, they filmed first. I don't know why, but then and then Pertwee had been chosen by the time they came to film the earlier scenes with the Time Lords. So why not just why not just throw him in? I would have loved to have had Pertwee for just 1 second in black and white, right? Just at the end, just to show that continuity.
I don't mind that they didn't. I think it's okay to like sort of leave it a mystery, like who's going to be not everyone. Certainly back then, very few people were like right on top of it and were on top of the casting news and whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have,
and it wasn't even called regeneration.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, there wasn't even a thing.
Opening the next season with Pertwee is fine. I will say the way they shoot it, I don't know how you really defend season 6B if you're a season 6B fan. Now, again, I've said before, it's a cool theory. I like it. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with it. But the very clear implication is that he's mid-change. Like he's like, if there was a whole nother season with Troughton, why is he contorting his face? Why is he letting out the croak? Why is he feeling so giddy?
So have you heard of this fan film called Devious? I did not know about this until I started researching the War Games. It's actually one of the last things that John Pertwee filmed. Certainly one of the last things that he... so he died in 96. His scenes for this were videotaped in 95. So this is in the dark times of Doctor Who.
Right, the Wilderness Years.
Right. And it's one of those fan videos where they had to avoid calling any using any character names like the Doctor. But the idea is that you have this actor who is playing a Time Lord who's sort of halfway between Pertwee and Troughton. Like his change has begun, but he's not fully in it. And then at the end, spoiler alert, they have and he faces an old man who, and the camera zooms around, and it's Pertwee. It's like, and he's, you are what I'm what I was. I'm what you're going to become. Like, lean into it, let go, whatever. I kind of love that idea that it was it was almost and this sort of also gives the lie to season 6B, right? If it's just contained within this one fan video. But I like to think that Pertwee's participation in this one almost makes it canon, makes it very headcanon-y.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I like that idea, and this was probably began ideas like this in the Wilderness Years, things along the lines of like the War Doctor and these sort of hidden things between regeneration. Well, I mean, if you could go back all the way to Legopolis, right? And even Planet of the Spiders with sort of the template for that. So they've always been wanting to, were willing to play with regeneration, what it could mean, and sort of the possibilities it creates.
And we talked about this before, how there's always been a helper, how, Davison to Baker was the first time that there was no sort of, helper character, or an explicit mention of the TARDIS, which we get in Power of the Daleks, as, creating allowing the renewal, as it was then called, to happen. So yeah, it would be absolutely in line with the whole plot of the show up until that point, to have the helper character. And it's also sort of nicely in line with the Guardians of the Edge, from Power of the Doctor, so it's in line with modern canon as well. That's nice. So yeah, Devious, check it out.
Cool. Will do. All right. So one last thing I want to talk about before we move on to the questions are the Time Lords themselves. And I know we talked about last week, but specifically in the War Games, there's some things that they do and say that are worth just touching on. So one of the things is what their sentence is for the aliens and the Warlord. So first of all, yes, they're godlike, but there's some really dark stuff that they end up doing, right? One is they torture the Warlord when he refuses to answer.
No Fifth Amendment here. No Fifth Amendment on Gallifrey.
You cannot refuse to testify. And then their sentence is dematerialization, which essentially just seems like capital punishment. Because I don't think, because if he's dematerialized from all of time, like he was never existed, did the War Games even happen? I think they did.
Yes.
Right? So,
they can't be that omniscient.
Yeah. So
omnipotent, rather.
So there's that.
That'd be super weird.
Now, they put their entire planet in a force field, they say. So that race is now forever imprisoned. I guess they regard them as so dangerous they can't have contact with the rest of the universe. Now, there is, I wouldn't say precedent for this, but it is sort of mirrored in their treatment of the Vardens, or at least the Doctor's treatment of the Vardens.
Putting them in a time loop.
Yeah, basically, there are apparently, and this is very kind of like diabolical if you think about it, where the Time Lords seem very comfortable passing judgment on other powerful races. You think about and keep just basically getting them out of the way, ostensibly for the good of the universe, but you could also make a very strong case that it's just to make sure they stay on top. And so the Time Lords have put the Warlords in a force field and kept them away from everything. They've time looped the Vardens, and they started a time war with the Daleks. So all these races that could actually challenge them, they're sort of neatly cast aside.
Much for not interfering.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I think they've explored how corrupt Gallifreyan society is. I would say that the thing that probably touches the most on exploring that corruption might be actually Trial of a Time Lord, where they, you find out, spoiler alert, that they were responsible for the whole Ravalox thing. But that's really interesting stuff. And I would say with that force field around that planet, right? Could there be a direct sequel to this episode? Because presumably when the Time Lords were gone for a while, and now they're gone again, that force field went away. So
or someone could come and open it up and take it out of that pocket universe, exactly like a cup of soup.
There you go. So I feel
I like that the Time Lord's punishment, their own punishment, right, kind of fits this crime in that regard. But yeah, you also put me in mind of we'll get to it when we get to it, but the human nature, family of blood, the revenge that the Doctor exacts. The fury of the Time Lord, like with one of them is sentenced to like go in the heart of a sun for all eternity, or there's a lot of stuff like that where you're like, oh, hang on, that's a bit harsh. Well, no, maybe he's just sort of reverting to type and being a Time Lord and kind of coming down with these harsh punishments.
Yeah, a little too comfortable, Tennant was at times, Mr. Time Lord.
Yeah.
Glorious.
But yes, it is interesting that this and the Trial of the Doctor and the Trial of the Time Lord is the only time we see Time Lord justice, and perhaps Human Nature, Family of Blood counts as well. But it's making me think, like, we're looking at potential spin-off shows. What about like Gallifrey CSI, or
Gallifrey
or just
Law
like
and Order?
Gallifrey Law and Order? Yeah, let's take it into the courtroom.
That's the Gallifreyan legal system.
Yes, exactly. Stories ripped from the Gallifrey Observer.
You heard it in the Matrix first. Now, say it for real.
All right, RTD, call us.
One more thing that was kind of hilarious, Patty, and it's just kind of a note where the Doctor and Jamie and Zoe are looking to escape from the Time Lords, and they're kind of like climbing around what looks like a weird sauna. And they're sort of balancing on these sort of barriers between the little mist pockets, and they go through, and you're just like, what the hell was that? Like, where was it? What was that about? Like, it felt like they built a set with this stuff and just had it, and they were like, well, we built the set. What are we using it for? Like, we already spent the whatever 1,000 pounds on this thing. And they're like, okay, screw it. Have him wander through it on the way to the TARDIS landing bay. And it's like, okay, that's the best you can do, really?
Call it the cloisters. I just had some inspiration. Like that's going to come in useful in the future. I don't know why. Just call it the cloisters.
It's just so random.
It is random, but my God, all of those scenes land so much better than they have any right to do. All of them, like the Doctor kind of giving up on escaping. Wow, like that as a child watching that at the time, it must have been like, oh, no, don't give up, Doctor. And Jamie and Zoe losing their memories so intense, and the Doctor turning to the Time Lord being like, I guess they're not going to remember, are they? And then the Time Lords themselves, definitely want to see more about their legal system after that. I was not expecting this with War Games. Also did not expect the incredible efficiency of like the build up to the arrival of the Time Lords. The 2 episodes before we finally see them. Yeah. We get moments like where the Warlord, like you get this whooshing sound and the Warlord just looks up and says, they're coming. And then there's that whole line of like, don't worry, he went to Arturo, right? He's like, don't worry, I know you wanted to shoot the Doctor because you think he's letting you go. When you were friends, when the Time Lords get hold of him, he'll wish you'd have killed him. Like, it's so ominous. Isn't actually borne out by events, but my God, do they dial up the ominousness of the Time Lords so well? I can't think of any race in Doctor Who has had any better introduction, which is so perfect.
Totally. I honestly feel like we didn't talk enough about the lead up to it and the Doctor and the War Chief in particular. So when he arrives at the base, the War Chief clearly recognizes him. And then
even though he's regenerated.
Yeah, even though he's regenerated, and they have so many scenes together and such good dialogue. And I really like the guy who plays the War Chief. His name's Edward Brayshaw, I guess. And he's really good. This
facial hair on point.
Well, yeah, that's another one of those sort of groovy 60s things that I think they kind of just used to do in science fiction more. And I miss it, where they just give you interesting facial hair. Like, remember Star Trek would always do the sideburns, that's sort of triangular sideburns or something. And I like.
And he's got a great medallion. He's got a great medallion. He's got the Mao suit. He's groovy 60s, baby.
Totally. And he's such a slimy, power-hungry guy. And I would say this is probably the one time in Doctor Who I can actually see why the bad guy thinks the Doctor could go bad. That he's persuadable. Like, I think in every other time, I'm always a little more like, well, don't you know the Doctor's such a good dude and he's never going to be on your side. I feel like in this case they do feel like two birds of a feather, sort of opposite sides of the same coin, in that they're both renegades, and he's not the master, right? He's not obsessed with the Doctor. He's not a psycho, but he's just gone out and decided to be essentially kind of a businessman and sell his technology and go.
Yeah,
he likes being on the winning side.
He's literally got like knockoff TARDISes. That's basically what the Sidrats are. They're like, cut price. He's basically, these are TARDISes that have fallen off the back of a lorry, whereas the Doctor just borrows his. This guy's like, oh, I just, threw these together last minute, bit of string, bit of knowledge of time travel, and they're going to break down faster.
Well, and
but
also,
that's fine.
I think what
I sold them some lemons.
What I think lacks a lot in the Master episodes, honestly, at least the later ones. I think in the earlier ones there was more of this, but he's embedded in the politics of these aliens, right? He's got that rivalry with the security chief, which I think works really well. And by the way, I think there's a big blunder. It's not a huge blunder, but it's a big blunder on the security chief's part, where he leaves the Doctor to be killed by his friends when they think he's turned to switch sides, before he listens to the taping. Because after the scene right after that is he listens to the taping and finds out the war chief's betrayal. And that seems like it's in the wrong order, because him leaving the Doctor there, which kind of goes against the warlord's orders, would get him into serious trouble unless he already had that chit, right? And so I feel like that was just done. He is a stupid fool, or whatever the line is, right?
He's thinking too linearly. He's easily foxed. But yeah, the war chief, I will now never forget that he's the war chief and not the war master. But he does have one thing which I don't know I've ever seen before or may ever see again in Doctor Who, which is interior monologue. There's that one moment where he's like, could it be, or time travelers, could it be?
Yeah.
Or something like that, like floats through his head and we hear it. And that's kind of weird. That's doesn't happen at any other point in the story.
Yeah, it's a little, I don't know. I didn't love it. I kind of forgot about it until you just said it just now, but I do remember it now. And I don't know if it's really necessary. Like, I think the look on his face, I don't think you do that today, certainly. I think they were just thinking like, oh, we need to signal this more. It's not enough that he just looks intrigued or something. And he doesn't really have a person to confide in, which again, I think really sells this whole idea. Like, he doesn't just want to corrupt the Doctor. He kind of wants a friend and a peer and someone he can trust and rely on. And he's just looking for that because he's so embroiled with the politics of these guys, and he's trying to stay one step ahead of the security chief. And he knows his side rats, they're all going to implode or whatever, or just stop working in a few hours. He suddenly sort of has this lifeline for all of that in the Doctor. So he's putting on some rose-colored glasses, even though he's like the one guy of the bad guys who doesn't have glasses. He's kind of putting on his own metaphorical glasses and seeing the Doctor is like, oh wow, I'm going to make him my pal. Then double your pleasure, double your fun, double your ability to stay one step ahead of these guys and maybe even turn the tables on them, which of course he wants to do. So really smart. Like again, much more believable, I think, sometimes than some of the times the Master has sort of tried some story or tried to win the Doctor over or whatever. I think he's
kind of a kinder, gentler Master in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So a war chief, great stuff. The Warlord, I just want to say a word about him. I remember he comes in around halfway through the story, maybe a little more, like 2/3 of the way through the story. We finally see the Warlord, and all I can say is Steve Jobs comes in to take charge, is what I thought this time as I watched it. His like outfit, it's almost like a black turtleneck, like certainly the glasses and the beard and stuff. And just the way he is and the way he talks, it's like he's Steve Jobs. He's the CEO of this war base and this war race, and he's just kind of like, all right, here's what we're doing, everybody, and everybody reveres him.
He is also like, he's a very, very returning bit player to Doctor Who, Philip Murdoch, and he's also in, we were talking about Deadly Assassin last week, he's in that. I believe he was Chancellor Groff.
Groff.
Goth. Sorry, I'm thinking of Jonathan Groff. No, Chancellor Goth, which is an even better.
That's Bernard Horsfall. That's
Oh,
what you're
okay.
thinking of.
Who am I thinking of?
I don't know. I'd have
Philip
to look up
Madoc.
who Philip Madoc.
He's in it. Yeah, he's in it somewhere. But yeah, he becomes a Time Lord in the next one. He was
the real that guy.
He's a real that guy. In fact, there's a documentary on him called "A Villain for All Seasons." Let's see. He's the War Games. He's the Warlord. Oh no, maybe I might be getting confused on this. Never mind.
Well,
but he's in the Brain of Morbius.
That's right.
Yeah, he was in the Crotons, and there's someone like there's so many people in the War Games who have so many different connections in other parts of Doctor Who. But yes, I removed my earlier statement about Time Lords, and he's not even that interested in the Time Lords in this one, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think he's great. I think your earlier comments about his understated performance and his ability to terrorize with just a phrase or a word, I think is dead on. I think he plays that really well. I think that's very contrasting to the War Chief. So you get these two flavors of villainy, whereas the War Chief is super slimy. This guy's just large and in charge, and quietly in charge. And I like his lines where he casually says he's going to do some horrible thing, and it's like nothing to him. Like there's a bit where he goes like, "No, use the conventional forces. Could be quite amusing," when he's talking about like killing a bunch of people in wherever it is. I think the Civil War zone is where they're in there. He's all in on the fun, which the security chief isn't. For some reason, I've always remembered the one line at the end where he's been put on trial with the Time Lords, but he escapes for a second, right? He gets his people and almost gets the Doctor to take him back to his home planet. But it's when his guards bust in, and by the way, pity those poor Gallifreyan technicians who were just offed by the security guards. I mean, Gallifrey, you got to do something about your own security. But he says, the warlord, he says, take these people, like he just, for some reason, that line where he's like, oh, casually take these people. Like it seemed like just such an almost Terminator line. Yes, of course I'm going to take these hostages. And if any attempts made to stop us, I shall kill them instantly. And he's just sort of like, yeah, whatever. That's what I do. It's why wouldn't I do that?
Yes, and he also just refuses to believe that the Doctor can't pilot the TARDIS. Yeah, which is kind of his downfall there. Don't talk rubbish. Of course he can steer it.
So I used to pick at the thing at the end where the Doctor gets free by turning on the bright lights, because all those guards, if you look close, you don't have to look that closely. They all have shades. They all have dark glasses. But I think that is a thing with this alien race. I think part of this whole thing with the eyewear is maybe they just have like super sensitive to light eyes. It feels like that's kind of what they're doing, even if they don't say it explicitly. There is something weird about their eyes, because even their regular glasses look weird, right? They all sort of obviously there's the hypnosis part of it, but I think that's sort of a weakness of the warlords. Their eyes are just super sensitive to light.
I'm actually looking at that segment in the transcript, and it's bringing up your point about dematerialization. Because the Time Lord does say you and your murderous associates will be dematerialized. It will be as though you'd never existed. So you're absolutely right. It does create a paradox. Like, well, guess nobody would have been here then. Guess the Doctor wouldn't be facing trial now.
Yeah, I think they're basically relying on the Avengers Endgame version of time travel in this particular case. So everything still happened, but you're just gone. I guess.
And everyone who's there just come back. No, they didn't do that.
Maybe it just happened differently. Maybe just the War Chief was around and pressing this empty chair.
Just this once, Rose, the War Chief lives.
Alrighty, well, that's a question we can ponder as we go into what we need to do, which is answer some other questions. And those, of course, are the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question. What if the evil plot had succeeded?
No, not the first. That's not the first question.
What is the first question?
The first question is, why did the randomizer take us here?
It's been so long since we've done the questions.
The randomizer's been dematerialized.
Do over.
Okay.
No, we don't need to do
All
over.
right.
You said the question. Let's do it. Why did the randomizer
Exactly.
take us here?
Why did the randomizer take us here? We don't really have music for the randomizer, do we? So it's not going to be too much of an issue. Obviously the cube.
Right.
Which we saw for the first time in The Doctor's Wife. We were intrigued by. I think the randomizer definitely listened to me on the, we talked about this on the front of the fact that I did ask for it to end our Troughton drought. We've been talking about the war games, the Troughton, yes. And it did. It took us there. It's clearly been very interested in Gallifrey. And it also, I asked it for a Viscount banger, which, that may be what it is. We don't know yet. That's a different question. But it's like it tested us for a number of episodes. I feel, we had a real series of not good stuff, and the War Games is a sign that we should keep faith. But also, it threw the thing that we were terrified of at us, and we had to. We had to deal with it as best we could, and I think we did. I think we've come through stronger. So, is that the best you can do, randomizer? You'll have to kill us.
You might say we're battle hardened.
Yes, we are. We are.
Yeah.
I don't see many connections to the Saranga conundrum exactly.
Well, here's my connection with the Saranga conundrum. It's on the other end of the memorable scale. So I find the Saranga conundrum so bland and boring that it's super forgettable. Whereas this one, I was riveted throughout and just, yeah.
I'm just realizing I lied. I did have a Saranga conundrum connection because you had some things to say about the sonic mine in the Saranga conundrum, about what a ridiculous weapon that is. However, everyone gets, sonic weaponed to hell and back in the War Games. There's a lot of... Well, aren't they? Aren't they? They certainly
make a noise. I mean, I guess
they make a noise, and everyone's like clutching their ears and falling to the ground. Also, by the way, we didn't even mention this. Is this like the second outing? No, it's got to be more than that for the sonic screwdriver. But it's whatever it is. Certainly, early example of the Doctor using it as a screwdriver, where he demonstrates to the German commander that he can undo the screws on his gun.
Right. The randomizer probably put a pin in this one after we did Fury from the Deep. Was like,
yes.
Okay, we need to do the only other time, I believe, on screen it's actually used as a screwdriver. Literally, you see a screw, unscrew, or unscrew back in.
Do we have a screwdriver as a screwdriver? Bingo? I think we do.
We've done it.
Hey!
That's it. And it's obviously trying to fill in Gallifrey bingo. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. Also, come to think of it, we have the bookended adventures of Troughton now, because we've done Power of the Daleks and we've done the War Games. So I think this is hinting that the next one might be An Unearthly Child. Because we did 10th Planet, right? So
yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
It is definitely chewing around the edges of Troughton, and not perhaps afraid to take a bite out of the middle because so much of it is missing. It's like Swiss cheese is the Troughton era.
Yeah,
but it obviously likes him. Obviously likes to dance around him. And oh my God, An Unearthly Child. Talk about another one where we'll have a lot to talk about.
So I think we need to move on to the second question. And since I've already said it, I'm going to, so then you did the first one so well. Chris, what is the second question?
The second question is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
And what if the evil plot had succeeded? So we touched on it a bit just in terms of how much sense it makes. So putting aside whether it's a good plot or not, the plot is, of course, they're trying to get all these humans to fight, to create an ultimate army and go conquer the galaxy. So presumably the evil plot succeeding is just that. How would that happen? Maybe the Doctor forgot his hypercube in the TARDIS, so the Time Lords never come. the warlord gets that army he was talking about from the home planet, quells the resistance, captures the Doctor. At this point, I think the war chief and the security chief are both dead. By the way, why didn't the war chief regenerate? That was a big question.
Very good question.
Big question my kids had. And there's an out-show reason, and there's no real in-show reason, but it'll be fun to talk about the in-show reason. So before we get to the evil plot succeeding, let's touch on this.
Mm-hmm.
So the in-show reason is that, the out-show reason, the reason is basically like regeneration didn't work the way we now know it works back in the classic series. And I'm not even just counting like Hartnell Troughton. Like I've said this before, it's pretty clear in the classic series, Time Lords are a little more vulnerable, probably a lot more vulnerable than they ended up actually being in the new series, where by the time you get to Capaldi, they're essentially unkillable. And, even just having one cell or whatever. I mean, I don't know if they say that, but like there's all this elaborate stuff they have to do when they take Missy to some executor planet. So in the classic series, I mean, I always thought if the Doctor was explicitly like shot and like murdered, like really severe bodily damage, he would probably just die because all of his regenerations are not that, like I feel like that's sort of the out-show reason of like, that they just didn't think Time Lords regenerated just by default on every single way they die. You could still kill them.
Which is what happens in even as late as the Deadly Assassin, right? Fast forward to 76, the president can be assassinated without regenerating. Totally. It does just seem to happen, and Time Lords don't get it. But it is weird that this is also the story where we get that classic line. Troughton actually says it. I luxuriated him in delivering it. We can live forever, barring accidents.
Yeah, he's clearly oversimplifying there just for his audience. Like, he doesn't have to go into the whole 12 regenerations thing. They just found out about Gulliver and Time Lords. I mean, come on.
Right, exactly. I guess we could say they were all accidents. All those other actual deaths of Time Lords, all accident. The death of the war chief was a whoopsie.
So I think
someone pressed the wrong button.
And I think the in-show reason is basically what we see in The Impossible Astronaut, which is to say maybe he did start regenerating, but then they shot him again because he's shot by multiple people for like several seconds, right? So I think basically you could go with the rule, which I think the show itself is probably violated, but like when you start regenerating, if you're in the middle of it, you get killed again, you're dead.
Yes. Rule number 1, the Doctor lies. Rule number 2, the Doctor lies about dying. Perhaps. But anyway, yes. What if the evil plot had succeeded? Well, I sort of, based on what we see here, and of course there's such little information about the Warlord and the planet of the Warlord, and we know his race aren't called Warlords. We don't even know what they are called. Like, is there even an army there? We don't even know. Are these just a bunch of like equivalent of dudes on the internet playing Call of Duty, pretending they have a giant army somewhere, and they're just sort of sitting there with their, talking about fragging on their headphone sets, and I don't know, like the kids do these days. But yeah, I'm like not quite convinced that if the evil plot had succeeded, they would be taking this army across the galaxy. I think that was all just an excuse. I think that's what they told their military leaders so they could get away with going off and having fun with different Earth war time zones. I think they would just be like, oh no, we got to do some more testing. Got to do some more. Let's bring in some more wars. Let's bring in some more humans with their wars. They're super fascinating because, in the war games, we learn that basically humans have the best wars. We are the most violent. We are informed, and so if they overcome the resistance, they just sort of it just happens over and over again because they're not really keen to move on or do anything with this. This whole army is like it's in development. It's in development hell. It's in production.
It's like rest and vest.
Exactly.
This is that alien race's equivalent. I like that. They're just sort of ineffectual in the whole conquer the galaxy plan. Oh yeah, like we weren't really going to do that. It's like,
Yeah, no, we'll get around to it. 5 years' time. Trust me, players, they're going all Elon Musk. In 10 years' time, we will conquer the galaxy with, once we've chosen the best the best soldiers to fight
Yeah.
with. We'll be amazing. Just so you come back and see.
yeah. So maybe that happens then, though. So maybe so fast forward 5 years or 50 years, and they actually have somehow put together this army. Which again, I think it kind of makes no sense that you need an army that's good at ground war in primitive Earth history to. I mean,
Yeah.
you can make the case. I guess good soldiers are good soldiers, but ultimately, if you were conquering the galaxy, wouldn't most combat be starship combat? And
Yes.
would you not then want like the best admirals or something like that? Maybe that is, a better.
Maybe they
game,
know
naval
this,
game.
but yeah, maybe so their superiors eventually like force them to get in like Lord Nelson and recreate the Battle of Trafalgar and let's do all the great sea warfare. And,
I guess you could kind of like maybe they've got that covered. They already have done that naval game / war game, and now this is for the ground forces.
This is very interesting because I've just made the connection between a major classic of science fiction, Ender's Game. What if it's an Ender's Game kind of situation, and what they're actually doing is selecting the best soldiers who will then think that they are fighting a war on their own planet.
Right.
It's the equivalent of Ender thinking that he's just playing a game, but it's actually somehow controlling the movement of these armies. But yeah, you're right. If it's just sort of like, the Daleks sitting in their battle fleet going, why are they sending a bunch of World War I soldiers at us?
Why are you wearing Roman garb? What is that broadsword? Okay.
Explain.
But I mean, if you buy into it and say like, okay, yes, somehow they've thought about this, the soldiers are good soldiers, whether they're processed or not, and they're this great army, so they start to conquer the galaxy. I think what happens after that really depends on a few things. One, is the Doctor still alive? Is he a prisoner of the warlords? Because obviously he would. I'm just calling them the warlords by shorthand. I'm not. We don't have a name for them by the aliens. Otherwise, he would just summon the Time Lords anyway. And I think whether the Time Lords get involved, because after that, if the Doctor doesn't summon them, they'll certainly become aware that this race has conquered the galaxy or is starting to. But that depends on whether, and I wondered this before, are the Time Lords in the same galaxy? If they're not, whatevs. If they are, it might still be whatevs because they're non-interventionist, right? And they're presumably protected with their transduction barriers and whatever else. And would they deign to interfere? I don't know.
No, because at this stage they're space Switzerland. So yeah, I don't really think that the warlord's heart is in it. So the evil plot succeeding, to my mind, is the warlord just gets to keep having fun building his army
on his glass tables.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do love that Ender's Game idea. Oh my god, that's so good. So good for Doctor Who.
Hey,
RTD, call it.
We already proposed the sequel. The force field's down.
Yes.
Let's do it. All right, moving on to the third question in proper order. What if? No, it's not what if. I'm really batting.
What if the Clara Splinter had succeeded?
I'm batting 0 this podcast. Oh my god, you're gonna have to take over the questions. Oh, okay, guys, where is the Clara Splinter? No. Do the effect.
You'll
later.
do the thing. No, I'm just adding my own kind of.
As we all know,
here's where.
Well, hold on. As we all
go
know,
ahead.
Clara Oswald, splintered in time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She is in every episode, somewhere in the background, sometimes the foreground, if you look at the footage from that episode. So,
yes. Usually going, Doctor.
Yeah, seemingly even more confused than the characters in the story. So, but she's there to save the Doctor. That's what she was born to do. What's she doing in this episode to do that?
So I think here's my my supposition is that Clara is the only other woman in the British Army. who isn't Lady Jennifer.
Okay.
And she has a key. She has a copy of Smythe's key, General Smythe's key, and is always unlocking his office when he thinks it's safe, because he would not be so idiotic as to just constantly leave it unlocked.
That's smart.
To reveal his secrets. Like, there's got to be something else going on there. So she's like Smythe's secretary, who's just off screen.
I like that. That's pretty good. That fixes that. I like to think that Clara is in the audience of the class scene, the university scene, where the scientist in the war base is giving all those students a lecture. And so she's there, and she looks a little bit like Zoe, especially with the glasses. So when there's a security alert, she's kind of running around being a decoy for the guards. So they're chasing her, and the doctor and Zoe can sort of go on and do their thing. And she keeps doing that. She keeps doing things to kind of like throw off the guards, and then turn around like, oh no, wait, it's just me. Clara, the students from Aurora, and she's like, oh,
yeah,
okay, whatever.
You know me.
And she might even hitch a ride in that side rat at the end of episode 7, so that when the guards blast away at the resistance and the security chief captures the doctor, she's back there going like, come on, we got to get back, because why wouldn't you just kill everybody? Like, that's one of the other plot holes, where it's like they have completely the upper hand on the resistance and they just grab the doctor and go, when they could have just sort of fortified their position and got even more guards and just killed everyone then and there.
See, it's because they don't want to even kill the resistance, man. It's like everyone's behind the same side, pulling the same strings, man. Got to look deeper. Anyway, I like that. By the way, side note on the side rats, I really love the doors.
The doors are cool.
I love that sort of the opening thing. Very, very 1969 kind of, this is the future. Doors will open this way.
It's future-y, and it also shows, it also hides the interior even better than the TARDIS.
Better than the TARDIS.
Which probably would have looked even worse.
So Clara could be doing all of those things. Here's a third possibility. So the only thing we know that Clara does do in the name of the Doctor is she tells William Hartnell to take the busted up old Type 40.
Right.
That's a lot more fun. So she's like pivotal in the Doctor. It's not just that she's saving it, like she's doing pivotal stuff. Now, we don't know who had the original idea among the Time Lords to send the Doctor to exile on Earth. Like those two Time Lord dudes, they pretend like they look like they're pretending like it's their idea. But it's also, they're not saying we have decided, like us two. I think maybe she's like a time lady at a Time Lord meeting with these dudes, or like she's behind the scenes in chambers, or whatever you have for Time Lord judges. We'll figure that out in Gallifrey Law and Order. But she's the one who's going, well, you know what? Be a great idea. You know how he's always going to that Earth place? Just send him back there. And here, make him look like this. Make him look like this guy.
She's doing the drawings.
Yeah, really quick sketch. Tell him he's going to look like these guys, and then when you actually turn him into this guy, he'll be okay with it.
Oh, wow. She is doing head games like nobody's been. That's perfect. I like that one.
Yes.
That's one.
And of course, knowing that the male Time Lords would pass it off as their own idea.
Oh, she is on it. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good job, Clara. That leads us very nicely into our final question. The only question that matters for the War Games. What did we think of this episode?
Well done in not doing a what if.
The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has 5 ratings. There is, of course, the Dalek, which is what we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which is what we give to a not so good episode of Doctor Who. There's the Professor Hater, which is a not so good episode, but at least they tried something or we learned something. There's something redeeming it somehow. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. And the rarely used Fixed Point in Time, which is a story that is beyond rating. We can't rate it. It wouldn't be right, often for reasons of nostalgia, but sometimes for other reasons. So those are the 5 ratings. I'm going to go first this time because I'm excited to hear you, because this was your first viewing of the War Games, and I want to keep everyone in suspense of someone a virgin war gamer and giving the rating. So I am calling this one a Viscount banger. It is long, but it is so worth the wait. This is a really well-paced story. I mean, it's using real history and it's building, like we said that word, it builds and builds and builds. It's 10 episodes. Doesn't feel like it. Yes, it's a little long, but it gets a little repetitive, but it's an epic. This is an epic sci-fi tale. It's got great characters and it just has a huge payoff at the end. So this is like superb Doctor Who. This is, 10 out of 10. Viscount banger.
Yes, Viscount banger. And of course, if you've been listening to Pull to Open so long that you don't remember where Viscount banger came from, Viscount banger is the name of the lord who is father of a Time Lord, or a Time Lady, rather. Romana's real-life father, Lalla Ward's real-life father, is the Viscount of Bangor, with an O, but we call it the Viscount banger because we just like that. And yeah, there's absolutely no question. This is a Lord banger, Viscount banger, Count banger, every Baron banger.
It's the banger chief.
It's the banger chief. Which is such a great DJ name. I might have to take that one. the banger in chief. That's right. We have a new rating in the Pull to Open. No, it's a top-notch Viscount banger. I was a little concerned going in. I was also, got to say, a little concerned in some of the sort of the interminable middle bits in the War HQ with the fridge poetry, fridge magnets and all that. Like there are some moments you're like, oh wow, this is not aged well, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. Bad fighting doesn't matter. The fact that Troughton messed up his line where he was supposed to say that like the Time Lords are, the leaders of our people or something like that, which was like he ad-libbed there and changed the whole history of the Time Lords, something we haven't talked about. Again, like Invasion of Time, where they kind of were supposed to say that the Gallifreyans had just landed there. Anyway, Viscount banger, no question. Totally. It builds up. It's his masterclass in storytelling. It totally deserves its ranking right at the top of the first 2 Doctors stories in the 2023 poll in Doctor Who magazine. Another reason for the randomizer to bring us here, right? It was like essential that I watch this now that it has been voted yet again the best of the first 2 Doctors runs. I couldn't go any longer without watching it, and I'm so glad I did. Would totally watch again. Absolute proof that you do not need special effects, good special effects, or a big budget to do good Doctor Who.
100%. All right, the double banger. Good stuff. All right, Chris, as delightful as experiencing the War Games was, we must run back to our TARDIS through this force field and find out where we're going next by activating the randomizer.
Indeed, and we have a perfectly length podcast at this stage. We've been talking for more than 2 hours about the War Games, which seems appropriate. I wondered if we were going to go for 10 hours on this. Feels like we easily could do. But no, speaking of the randomizer, in the novelization of the War Games, the Doctor tries to do one more thing to outrun the Time Lords. He tries to put the TARDIS on random. So, like, on the principle that if he doesn't even know where he's going, they won't either. And obviously this was something he would try again later with the Black Guardian. But it's interesting to see that that's one of his go-to strategies, and you'd think it would succeed if you're sort of used to Doctor Who at this stage, but no, it doesn't, which makes it even more terrifying. Anyway, the randomizer has 2 components. Pete, what is your component?
My component is the Pull to Open Codex, which is a list of every single episode, every single story of Doctor Who that has been shown on television, which is 302 of them. So we're going to need to introduce a random element to choose
which is
from these.
played by random.org, which looks for hypercubes bouncing around the atmosphere, or just looks at the pattern of random atoms bouncing around the atmosphere, which gets over the pseudo-random problem of algorithms that only guess at true randomness. So what I'm doing with random.org, aka the executor, is I'm going to plug in the number 1 for the minimum random number, and a maximum number of however many stories in Doctor Who history we still have to do. Pete, what is the magic number?
The number today is 220.
Wow. So close to that 219, so close to the 200 teens. I can taste it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
so what we
all
like to
right,
do
so-
before we hit the button, we like to challenge the randomizer. Chris, do you have a challenge for the randomizer?
Well, I gotta say that after the war games, you really need a palate cleanser. So what we really need is something small scale, not a lot happens. You know, maybe big stakes, maybe a good drama, but like let's bring the scale down a little bit. Let's bring the overall length down a little bit. Please, please, please don't give us Flux. Or Dalek's Master Plan, or indeed any. Please, no 6-parters. Please, no even 4-parters. Like, just simple, nice, simple, small scale. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I had something
No,
similar.
watch it, not listen.
It doesn't have to be that simple, but I would say, like, I'm wore out. You know, like, let's get something that either has nothing to do with war, or at least doesn't have war in the title, or no wars.
Yeah, what about love, man? What about love?
Yeah.
What about the love games? You know, something groovy for
I'd even
1969.
take wandering around a space museum. That's fine. That's not war.
Hey, that would work. Or maybe Edge of Destruction, like, you know, super short, kind of, you know, one setting, that kind of thing.
But
so,
no wars, no battles, no skirmishes, no slap fights.
Yeah, watch it take us straight to the empty child.
Yeah, let's get some more creative conflict here. Okay. Are you ready? I'll give you a countdown.
Yes, do it.
All right, here we go. In 4, 3, 2, 1.
We're in grave danger.
Oh shit, number 4.
Are you kidding me?
4.
Oh my. We are at Marco Polo, which is literally the 4th serial, because we haven't done 1 through 3.
Yeah, because this is the earliest we've done, beating the censorites.
Beating the
Yeah.
it's the one completely lost serial of season 1 of Doctor Who.
Oh,
So
no.
There are no episodes. I don't think it's been animated, to my knowledge.
No.
So we're stuck with some telesnaps, and some novelizations. It's 7 episodes, so that's a tough one.
Ouch.
Yeah, we're
Well, it certainly didn't give us simple. Thanks,
simple.
randomizer.
It's definitely a bit of a brain teaser on this one. We're gonna have to figure out the best way to watch. As always, there's stuff on the internet that'll help us.
But there's no war in this one, right? So
There's no war.
Clever randomizer.
Yeah. She came through. Is it a she?
Mhm.
Should we start humanizing the randomizer? She came through.
Sure, this week she's a she.
Thanks, darling. All right. Thanks for that. And thank you, Pull to Open listeners, for going with us on this journey through the 10 episodes of the War Games. Guys, it's Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Podcasts are great things to subscribe to if you're somehow encountering this in a web embed, or you're just trying us out because a friend of yours shared the podcast with you, which, hey, by the way, as we said earlier, is the best thing you can do short of reviewing the show and following us all over on social media. We're, of course, at Pull to Open on TikTok, Pull to Open 63 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, youtube.com/Pull to Open on the YouTubers. Spotify listeners, hey, please go ahead and rate and review the show. A reminder, we have polls, so you too have your voice. Go ahead. We gave 2 Viscount bangers for the War Games. Now it is time for your voice to be heard. Tell us what your rating is for the War Games. If you're listening on Spotify, pick one of those options. And come on all back for Marco Polo and what's going on with that one.
That's right. We will see you next week along the Silk Road.
Take care, folks.